I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Do you want to do the land acknowledgement?
Thank you. I missed that last time. We must acknowledge with respect as non-native people that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. And now, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
Actually,
Yes, you may, please.
so if possible, I'd like to pull, if possible, this could be wrong, to the second reading of ordinance 1133 to a date certain, just so we can have more discussion. There's a lot of good discussion regarding it with the EAB meeting, and they would actually like to bring us some information, and they didn't feel they could bring the information and the experts to this meeting, so they'd like to push it out to actually, it was November, if possible, the second reading. To the 11/7 meeting if possible, so they could have a lot of information for us.
I see that Attorney Dittman has his hand up too. Because this has already been posted as a public hearing and second reading, we have to open it as such. And then you can choose to continue or extend or take action at that time. But we do have to open the public hearing and take action from that point. Attorney Dittman, sorry, anything more?
No, you took the word right out of my mouth. So thank you.
So you can introduce that amendment.
No, perfect.
when we get there. Great, thank you. Any other amendments?
Could you do it before the first reading? Just out of curiosity.
Could you?
Okay.
You could, I mean, the first reading typically just sets the public hearing at the second reading, but you could continue the first reading if you so wanted to. Or you could, potentially vote it down on first reading and it starts the process all over again. And so there's options there, but you can continue any agenda item to a date certain.
All right, are there any other amendments to the agenda? No? All right, let's vote on agenda approval.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We'll take a reflective moment of silence. Thank you. And we'll move on to audience business. Clerk Vasquez, has anybody signed up?
No, thank you. No.
Okay, then we'll go online. And yep, I see Mr. Browning there. Would you please state your name and address for the record? And then you will have 3 minutes.
Will do. Mark Browning, 633 First Avenue. I'd like to give a little bit of quick background on fire risk mitigation, which is on your general business items tonight. In 2021, the town had a task force on fire risk that included 2 experienced firefighters, fire district board members, citizens, and closely worked with some PCDC board members, including Mayor Pro Tem Farrell. On July 19th, 2021, that task force presented a report at a BOT workshop. It's available in the Agenda Center. The first item listed on town properties for possible mitigation was the Martin parcel, described as high density. Not long thereafter, a budget process ensued. The staff initially proposed a $25,000 sum for fire risk mitigation. The board upped that to $125,000, increased it by 5-fold, with specific discussion about the Martin parcel. The staff was also directed to bring an annexation resolution for the Martin parcel to the board, so the town would have full control of the property. There was unanimous agreement on that. There were follow-up requests made in early 2022 by the prior board about getting the annexation done and getting the mitigation done, but there were excuses offered for delay. So in early October of this year, with still nothing done on either annexation or mitigation, 6 former trustees sent a letter urging that both those things proceed. The staff response in the packet totally ignores the annexation and briefly mentions the Martin parcel, but mostly redirects attention to vacant lots and working with the county and state in the future. Those aren't binary choices. Of course, the town should work with the county and in the state in the future on grants, but the town can act now on its own properties. There's money to do it, budgeted partly for the Martin parcel. The town can mitigate both open lots that were listed as medium density by the task force and the high density Martin parcel. The Board of Trustees has in the 2020 budget enough money to do both. Less than 10% of that $125,000 has been spent so far. I can't argue properties in this limited time, but I would urge you to just go walk the Martin parcel, and we sent you pictures with the letter. There are dead trees on the ground. There are dead trees standing. There are stacks of dead wood against trees. There's chest-high invasive weeds. There are dead limbs going from the ground to trees. There are old wooden construction pallets lying around. You don't have to be an expert to know that that's a fire hazard, and it's also just a messy piece of property. Whatever priority you may put on the cleanup of this property, the fire mitigation on this property and other properties, this property is in disgraceful shape. How can the town ask or compel or fine residents for not cleaning up dead wood and weeds on their own property when the town keeps its property in this shape? The town needs to.
Your time is up, Mr.
Okay,
Browning.
the town needs to set an example for residents and get this property cleaned up now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online who wishes to address the board at this time? I don't see anyone. Clerk, do you?
I do not.
Okay. So we'll move on to the Boulder County Sheriff's report. Do you know if Sergeant Christ is joining us?
I was contacted today by Sergeant Christ, and he is apparently taking this week off as vacation. He did say that he did not have anything of significance to report tonight, and since he gave an update last meeting, and so no, there's no more information.
Glad he's taking some time off. He sure deserves it. Okay, so we'll move on to ordinance and public hearings. Tonight we have a second reading of public hearing of ordinance 1133, which is an ordinance of the town of Lyons amending section 18-1-40 of the Lyons Municipal Code, repealing and reenacting articles 2 through 10 of chapter 18 of the town of Lyons Municipal Code, and adopting by reference the International Building Code 2018 edition, International Residential Code 2018 edition, including Appendix Q for tiny houses, 2018 International Residential Code, International Mechanical Code 2018 edition, International Plumbing Code 2018 edition, International Property Maintenance Code 2018 edition, International Existing Building Code 2018 edition, International Energy Conservation Code 2018 edition, International Swimming Pool and Spa Code 2018 edition, International Fuel Gas Code 2018 edition, making specific amendments to the above. Can we please have a staff report? Welcome back, Eric.
Thank you, so Mayor and Trustees. So during the first reading, there were some additional questions that were asked with regard to adopting the 2018 International Building Safety Code. And most of those I did try to add into either the cover memo or made some adjustments in the actual ordinance itself. One of those that was not covered here that I was waiting for confirmation from our building inspector was on the annual permit. It was asked, what does an annual building permit mean? And that's something for larger buildings, somebody who has a property manager or maintenance who may be constantly replacing water heaters, doing other work in a multi-unit building. And so they could pull an annual permit. and then track everything they have, call in for the inspection. Clients have not used that. That's just something that is in the code itself there. So we could use it if it became a request or a need. But again, that's something so that a building maintenance person could pull an annual permit to do building. They do have to write in specifically what types of projects they plan to do throughout the year so that they can't just do anything that they would want to. And I also tried to give the links, or not, I gave the links to a number of the different codes there in the cover memo, in case somebody wanted to try to go through those in more detail. Again, we know there are thousands of pages of the code there. And so a lot of it was just taking the exceptions that the town made to the 2015 and then making sure that they still matched and were still needed in the 2018. The 2018 International Building Code was put out as more of a refinement or fixing some of the things that they thought were not working great in the 2015 code. I had done some research and found it appears that they sort of go, so every 3 years for the code, and then they skip codes, being the 2018 was a refinement of the 2015. The 2021 is quite a new overhaul of the international code. Then the expectation is the 2024 will be a refinement of the 2021. 27 would be a whole new upgrade. Again, they're going to try to add in things that become a concern in those 3 years, but that's the pattern that the International Code Council uses. Also amended the ordinance so that it would take effect January 1st, 2023, if it was passed. In that time frame, we did also have the PCDC and the Sustainable Futures Commission contact me, and I've heard from members, but have not had a full report from either of them. They may have submitted something in the meantime, but it sounds like also the EAB has some concerns on the code. I know there is some desire to go to the 2021 for some reason, and then that was more what I heard from Sustainable Futures members. And then the PCDC had expressed concerns going the other way on what effect that would have, which was also something that was expressed by you as trustees with regards to some of the development that's possibly in place, in particular, the new hotel development. And so anyone who has applied, or in this case would apply before January 1st, 2023, would follow the 2015 codes. After that date, they would start to follow the 2018 codes that the buildings would be required to meet. So the proposal here from staff was to go ahead and move the bar forward to adopt the 2018 International Code. Again, being a refinement of the 2015 code. There did not appear to be large changes. It is still a difference in looking at the International Energy Code. There is some slightly higher insulation requirements when you go to 2018 from 2015. There will be some other items in the 2018 that are stricter or may require more expense to meet those items. Not as much from what I've been advised in the 2021 code. Well, the 2018 does not have as much as the 2021. The 2021 codes would be much more substantial to try to meet. There's a lot more in there. We can move to those codes, and our our building inspector, we could have them meet those codes, but it would require some more work on all the staff part to definitely make sure we're understanding the 2021 codes if we went to that. So the recommendation was to adopt the 2018 codes on second reading and advise or direct the PCDC to start their review of the 2021 suite of codes with the possibility of maybe bringing them forward by June 1st of 2023. If that was what they were going to recommend. If they have a recommendation for the Board of Trustees within 6 months, well, 9 months by June of 2023 was just a date set so that we have the comp plan out of the way, and some of the IGA work that we're gonna be looking at, CCDC will be looking at. And then have them really dig in depth in the 2021 International Code.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Director Kaplan? I have some questions. So have there been any municipalities that you know of that have done like a leapfrog from 2015 to 2021?
I haven't looked if they've done the direct leapfrog. I do know there are some communities long run that are on the 2021 now that have adopted that.
And would it be possible to maybe get some feedback from the communities who have adopted the 2021 code to kind of see what they think and what their challenges might have been?
Sure.
And then when you said anybody who applies before the 2018 code is enacted, which would be January 1st, you mean applies for permits, for building permits?
Correct. Submit the building permit application. It would just have to submit the application. It wouldn't have to be issued at that time, but if the application was submitted on January 1st.
Okay. And then last question is, do you know of any examples of folks mixing and matching the code? So adopting parts of the 2018 code and then maybe parts of the 2021 code?
Not specifically.
Okay, is that a possibility, do you think?
Yeah,
Okay.
we did last time. We adopted the 2015 code, but not the 2015 code, but not the International Fire Code. And we did a modification of that really based on the 2018. I don't think they specifically adopted the 2018 because we were not requiring sprinklers in single family construction, but otherwise it's going up towards that.
Okay, so in theory, would it be possible to adopt the 2018 code and the 2021 energy efficiency code at the same time?
It would. I have heard that there could be some concern that in general, they are developed to work together. There may be more exceptions that would need to be made in that case, but yes, you can adopt certain ones. I know Boulder County adopted a separate smart building code that was not directly one of the codes, but one that they custom made to put out there. Because even though they're on the 2015 code, and looking further into it, they developed this smart building code that they pulled what they wanted to from the various codes, so that it is a bit stricter than just the 2015 code that one would look at.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else have any questions? Okay, well then I will open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Anybody online wish to comment during the public hearing? Dave, would you please state your name and address for the record, and then you will have 3 minutes.
Yes, I will. Dave Hachimonji, 200 Welch Court, Lyons, Colorado. Good evening, trustees. While I'm a member of the SFC and work in Boulder County's Office of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience, these thoughts and comments are mine alone. I'd like to start by first saluting the town for its desire to move beyond its current use of the 2015 International Building Codes, or I codes, as there are no longer a sufficient response to newer yet established energy efficiency technologies, constraints on our natural resource systems, our dependency on fossil fuels to heat our homes and businesses, and their associated greenhouse gas emissions, and the increasing threat of the next natural disaster. That said, I am critical of the town in its consideration of adopting the suite of 2018 building codes without a thorough appraisal of the alternatives, despite the issues submitted by the SFC to the BOT, just so the town can get in front of the new hotel development. To me, this is a disservice to the residents and businesses of Lyons. While I agree with town staff that staying on the 2015 cycle building codes no longer make sense for the reasons just stated. We should be moving up to the 2021 suite of building codes instead, as it affirms the town's climate crisis declaration 2021-105, whereby the town states that it will do everything in its power to swiftly and decisively address the acknowledged climate emergency we now find ourselves in. Now, given that there's chatter that moving to these newer 2021 codes, which studies have shown save on average 8.6% in overall energy use for a building over the 2018 codes, that this will somehow stifle development. I put forth that as a compromise, you should hit the pause button on adopting the staff proposed 2018 building codes and look to the work currently being undertaken by a cohort of 6 Boulder County municipalities and the county, along with Broomfield and North Glen, who have either adopted 2021 or are planning to, and who are now jointly becoming better informed and prepared to implement that suite of codes. This, as well as other well-respected organizations in the state and nationally, have done the heavy lifting, and to not leverage this work before considering what new codes to adopt, to me, is not responsible. In closing, thank you for considering my input, and feel free to reach out to me or to your Sustainable Futures Commission on this topic should you desire.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Would anybody else like to speak on this issue? No? Okay, then I will close the public hearing. And I would entertain a motion so that we can begin discussing. Trustee Dutchess?
Okay, so we're not motioning to approve the ordinance on the second reading, but we're approving the discussion.
No, well, no, we need a motion.
Okay.
And then we need a second that we can go there.
I motion to approve ordinance 1133 on second reading.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second, so now we can begin discussion. Trustee Wilson?
So this is where I can make my motion. Right. So I would like to propose, so I would like to propose that we move this out to a date certain, which if it works, 11/7 is one of our meetings. The SFC, the SFC would like to move possibly to then, so they can bring us more information, like Dave, last name mentioned, about the 2021 codes. They can bring some more information to us to see what the pros are, the cons, with switching from jumping from the 2015 to the 2021 as opposed to the 2018, just so we can be well informed. I also don't think that it's a bad move for us to move to the 2018 and then move next summer to the 2021 also.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I think we'll need a second on that before we can proceed.
That was a motion, correct?
Oh, that was a motion.
Yeah, I read that as a motion. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
I thought so too.
Okay, would you like to second that and then discuss?
Okay, so I have to second and then discuss. Okay, then I second that motion.
Okay, and go ahead.
Now we can discuss it.
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think as the board, we need to get as much from the commissions as possible. So no one's arguing against that, but I think we should include other commissions, because I know I've heard a lot of the sentiment before that we're an overly regulated town from the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development. And you can invite them to come as well. But I heard it for 8 years with BCDC that we're totally overregulated, which I don't understand, because we're a lot less regulated than anybody else in this area. Still, I would like that just to be brought up in the open.
Other comments? Trustee Delman?
I agree with Mayor Rogan that 2018 sounds good with the energy efficiency of the 2021. If we can add that in there.
And how do you feel about postponing to a date certain?
I think that's a good idea to postpone it to hear from people who've been studying it more than we have.
I'm comfortable postponing it to a date certain.
And so am I, and Dave, I see you're still on the line. I did read, and I actually have printed out the letter from the Sustainable Futures Commission, so we appreciate your work on that. In terms of the date being November 7th, would that, what I would like to have happen is while we're having the commissions weigh in, maybe staff doing some research about what the challenges have been for other communities, and I just want to make sure that we're giving enough time for staff to do that.
And should we have a workshop? As opposed to just doing it during the meeting? I know we're really packed with things to do.
I don't know that we could have a workshop prior. Our workshops are pretty booked out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that-
so I'm
that
not
was
sure we could do that. Yeah, it's a good thought. I wish we had more time.
There would be room on the November 7th agenda if you choose to put it there. I guess it's up to Aaron.
We do have an extra week, right? We're 3 weeks out. for
So we
that
can
one.
make that happen.
Okay. Okay, so the motion on the table is to move this to a date certain. Attorney Dittman?
Yeah, just a couple considerations, no way trying to sway any opinion on this, but I just want to note for the record a couple things. One, something the board needs to consider is if no matter what the decision is, if the board wants to be effective by January 1, there is a 30-day publication period, right? So this we couldn't really forestall any more than the second meeting in November and get this effective by January 1. And so that's something to keep in mind, for one. And secondly, if it was the board's decision to not go to the 2018 code series, and instead go to the 2021 code series, we'd probably have to start this process over again. Because that was never noticed as a possibility. So any potentially affected party would have the right to, comment on the 21 codes as opposed to the 2018 codes. And so we would be probably, if we were going to do that, probably having, a second reading on that second meeting in November, which it looks like is the 21st, or so be a new first reading on the 21st. The decision was to move it to the 2021 codes. So there's some things to consider, not determinative, of course, but some things to make sure you have in mind.
Okay, I appreciate those notes. Thank you very much. Administrator Simonson?
Thank you. I'm wondering from a timing perspective, to make this be able to go into effect January 1st, we're getting close. Another option could be to adopt all of 2018 and then pursue the 2021 energy code. And start over for first and second reading only on those two. And then maybe have those go into effect, March 1st or something. Would be just another option. So we could get the 2018 building code in place.
And I appreciate that option. And at the same time, I do want to hear from the boards and commissions that want to weigh in, and I do want to hear from the staff research about other municipalities that have done this. Or had, assembled piece parts of different codes. Trustee Duffy?
Can I ask why January 1st is January 1st our goal right now? Is there a reason behind that?
No, that was just to give some time so that we weren't doing it just 30 days after reading. We were setting a date.
Okay, so it could be February 1st, it could be March 1st, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be January.
Correct.
I guess the only thing I would add to that is that January 1st, logically people expect, those new requirements kind of come into place then. And I think there's probably some thought about thinking about when the building permits for the hotel is going to get pulled. I'm not sure when that is. Probably not by January 1st, but at a certain point, if this process is concluded, but before they pull permits or apply for permits, then they're going to be under the 2015 code. And so that's something to keep in mind, whether you want them to be in the 2015 code or the 2018 or 2021. That project, any other project, will certainly be effective by when the effective date of this ordinance is.
Yeah, good to know, but I personally, think continuing the second reading of this until November 7th, I think is fine. And it'll give us more information. So I'm in support of doing that. Any other comments? No. Okay, so we'll vote on trustee Elson's motion to continue this to a date certain, November 7th, correct, Attorney Dittman?
That's correct. It's superior motion, so it's not dependent upon the first motion. And so we're just voting on to continue till November 2nd. 7th.
Okay.
Excuse me, yep.
November 7th, okay.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so we'll be talking about this again on the 7th, and to the SFC and the EAB and all the other boards and commissions, really appreciate the input on this. And thank you in advance, Erin, for the research you are about to undertake. All right. Clerk Vasquez, will you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Yes, item 1 under consent agenda is resolution 2022-92, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a stormwater utility easement agreement with 423 Reese Street and 423.5 Reese Street. Item 2 is resolution 2022-93, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the third amendment to the construction agreement with Mountain Constructors Incorporated for the Safe Routes to School pedestrian bridge project. Item 3 are the October accounts payable, and item 4 are the October 3rd, 2022 Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, trustee Elson. We have a motion and a second. Is there anything any trustee wishes to remove from consent? Seeing none, we will vote on the consent agenda.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. All right, next up, we have boards and commissions. Tonight we have some guests from Cc4ca via the SFC, and they will be giving us a presentation. Welcome.
Thank you.
Feel free to introduce yourselves.
Good evening, and thank you for making time on your agenda for us this evening. Mayor Rogan and trustees, my name is Anita Seitz. I'm the Advocacy Director for Colorado Communities for Climate Action. I'm also a former elected official. I served on the Westminster City Council for 8 years, was Mayor Pro Tem and finally Mayor. And worked with Cc4ca when I was a council member, and it really helped propel our community's ability to act on state and federal climate policy.
And well, the same welcome or hello. Welcome us. Hello, Mayor and trustees. It's great to be here and meet all of you. And I'm the executive director at Cc4ca, Colorado Communities for Climate Action. I am also a recovered mayor. I was mayor in Golden, loved serving, and thrilled to get to continue to work with local governments and local elected officials. So we've got the slide. Oh, I'm sorry. And my name is Jacob Smith. I guess I didn't say that. So I think I am going to share my screen. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay, and I don't know how, let me try to go to full screen on this and then. Perfect. Okay, well, we wanted to, you all have been a member for several years now. We never actually met you all in person. And I think there's been a lot of turnover since we started working with Lions. So we wanted to come up and just introduce ourselves and give you a really quick update on the work we're doing and give you a chance to ask us any questions that you might have about Cc4ca. The really high level explanation, coalition of local governments, counties and municipalities across the state, 39 members. We are 2/3 rural, half of our members are West Slope, half are on either Front Range or other parts of the not West Slope part of Colorado. So it's very diverse geographically. We range in population, our members from under 500 to, or rather under 1,000 to over 500,000. So a wide range of population sizes as well. And fundamentally, we exist to amplify the voices of local elected officials and local governments in these state policy venues around climate policy. Our job is strengthen climate policy at the state level. All local governments that have climate goals have run into limits on how much they can do locally, and there are just state barriers, either statutory or regulatory or programmatic, and it's really difficult for individual jurisdiction to have a lot of influence at the state level. When you all show up at the legislature, the only person who cares about what you think, if you're lucky, is your state rep or your state senator. And the same, it's not quite as bad in the regulatory arenas like the Air Quality Control Commission, but still fundamentally, you're just a single jurisdiction, especially for smaller jurisdictions. And the premise was, let's pull a bunch of jurisdictions together and speak with one voice, and that should have an outsized impact on very much what's happening, because there's as many members as we have. Almost a quarter of the state's population is represented by our membership, or by our membership collectively. We carry some real impact at the legislature, at the PUC, the AQCC, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, all of those venues with the governor's office as well. So fundamentally, our job is to amplify all of your voices to make sure we end up with climate policy at the state level that is as strong as possible. We also do provide other benefits and services. We do a lot of keeping folks up to date on what's happening in the legislature and in those regulatory venues on climate science that matters at the local level, and a lot on plugging you all into whatever extent you want to plug in on the advocacy itself. So lots of local electeds, Anita will talk about this, actually end up testifying at the legislature or at these regulatory bodies from our members, and sometimes not from our members, but where we have relationships. So we spend a lot of energy to support you all doing that to the extent that you want to. So there's other benefits as well, but the core of it is our members want to have some voice, they want to have some agency when it comes to state climate policy, and that's why we exist. And in Boulder County and Boulder were two of the original, maybe those, but if not two of the original members. We started in 2016 with just 6 members, and we're now 39. We've grown every year. There's very clearly a hunger among local governments to have a voice on these issues. I won't linger on this, but just to give you a sense of the span of members, and this is in your packet as well. This slide is just here to underscore that every jurisdiction has a seat on our board. Edward Keynes from yours, I'm going to get the name of Sustainable Futures Coalition. He is currently your representative. He's fantastic. We met him, I guess, back in June at the retreat. We have loved working with him. But it's entirely up to you. You can have multiple people. You can have a board member and alternates. It could be staff or electeds or appointed folks that are appointed to your advisory boards. And then there are other committees. So to whatever extent you all want to plug in anywhere else, you're welcome to, but not expected to. Really, our members range from, on the one extreme, they are aligned and want to be part of the organization, but don't have any capacity to do anything else at all the way up to like a Boulder County or a Pitkin County, jurisdictions like that that just have a lot of capacity. And so they're on every committee and testify all the time. We welcome members to land anywhere on that spectrum. I won't, in the interest of time, won't go through all this in detail, but I just wanted to flag the legislative session is one of the places that we spend a lot of effort. And this last session was substantial from a climate perspective. A lot of big bills were in play, and a lot of those passed. Actually, most of the big ones did pass. A few of them didn't, but we'll continue to look for ways to move those forward. Again, in the interest of time, I won't go into any details on this, but just to say these are 3, I'm going to mention just 6 of the biggest bills of the session. These are 3 of them. And then 3 others here. I just want to mention that energy code one, you all just obviously had an extended conversation about. One of the things we're most proud of in this last session was in that bill that sets the next round of energy code updates for jurisdictions across the state. We fought really hard to make sure there's money in there to support local governments that need to now do additional training of their staff or build up their internal infrastructure to be able to support those changes in building codes and energy codes, and as well as money for local governments that are going to build buildings and need access to resources to help make sure their own buildings are built to those codes. And also mention just one piece of the huge round of influx of federal money that's starting to flow into Colorado and elsewhere from the infrastructure package a year ago, and now the new IRA some of that money is allocated specifically, it's over 200 million. It goes directly to local governments to support the same kinds of things. So there's a lot of funding out there that should help make it easier for local governments to do this kind of work. And then, again, we'll talk about these, but happy to talk about any of them when I finish if you have questions or want to know more. And I'm also happy to talk afterwards separately at any point as well. But a whole bunch of work on the regulatory side as well, including these locked in dates on coal-fired power plant retirements, which has been a huge fight to make sure it's not just prospective retirement dates, but those dates are actually federally enforceable now, which is a huge deal. And a lot of the statutory work ends up kicking off regulatory processes. So we pass a bill and then we spend the next several years, a year or a year and a half, maybe 2 years, working on the regulations that are designed to implement those bills. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing on the regulatory side is really translating the statutes into on the ground regulatory implementation. And here I'll just hand it over to Anita.
So this is a list of just last year, the amount of member engagement we have. And the reason we are so successful as an organization is we have great members. And so like Jacob just mentioned, there's a spectrum of involvement. And the reason that's important, and Jacob didn't say this, so I'm going to highlight it. When we speak as local governments, our state delegation listens, our regulatory agencies listen. We feel the impact of climate change and natural disasters that are more frequent from climate change disproportionately. It really impacts our budgets and our community members. And so he showed you that list. I mean, it's Adams County and it's Aspen, very diverse. But we operate under a unanimous policy statement. And so all of our members, that is how ubiquitous the threat of climate change is, the vulnerabilities local governments feel. So when you have 118 different local government officials testifying, it makes an impact. And that's why every major piece of climate legislation that's passed over the last half decade, Cc4ca has been a part of. So we just want to say thank you for your membership. People remember 2013. We know that you are ground zero for impact, and so it does matter. So thank you for your involvement. There's a lot of different ways that people can be involved that matches their level of comfort or their time, their capacity. So that's legislative testimony. It's, as Jacob mentioned, regulatory hearings or written public comments. It can also be just outreach meetings with your delegation, either state or federal, or writing opinion pieces. And my job and my team's job is to make that as easy as possible, to really be a concierge, to help provide the background, set up the appointments, make it as easy and seamless for you as local electeds and local officials, because we recognize we've both lived it. We know how busy you are. And looking ahead, there's going to be a lot of opportunity and need to have participation. Jacob just mentioned federal funding. So typically we work elevating the voices of local governments, but there is such historic funding right now that can really help local governments meet our climate goals, that we've been acting as a conduit of information from different, like how is the state helping local governments access this? Because so many local governments have capacity issues. To just go through and look at all of the funding that's available, decide if they're eligible, is that where they want to use their matching dollars, can be fatiguing, and they may not have the ability to do it. So trying to figure out what are the supports that are currently available, liaising with the state, letting them know what we're hearing from our local governments as far as what there should be available, and then just bringing those opportunities fully forward. So and doing deep dives in them. As far as new legislation or regulatory, that producer responsibility organization, you have a slide over it, that's fundamentally going to change how recycling is paid for in Colorado, taking the burden off your residents and local governments, and having people who decide what packaging to use. That will help fund recycling programs. So that's going to be how that's going to be shaped, will be in play this next year. Advanced clean trucks. Trying to improve air quality and emission standards from fleets, medium and heavy duty. I don't want to go through all of this. You can read the list, but if any of this is exciting to you and you want to be more involved, please reach out and let me know. We'd be happy to engage you in any of those. And if you'd also like to know about what's going on, you maybe don't have the capacity, but you have the interest, let us know. We'd love to sign you up for our roundup, which is our newsletter that comes out every other week, roughly, with updates. And I know you had us on a 10-minute, I don't want to go over, so.
You guys are great. Thank you so much. I know being former electeds, you've got the timing down. So appreciate that. I have a couple questions, but I wonder if any of the other trustees would like to ask any questions.
So I'm curious as to who is representing the town of Lyons. So you mentioned somebody from the Sustainable Futures Commission. Edward King.
Yes.
So he is our representative.
At the moment, yes, and you are well, so he is the designated representative to the board. And Kim, I think we have also listed as an alternate on your staff, but you're welcome to add additional alternates if you want. We welcome as much involvement as you all want and have the ability, capacity to offer. And then we have those other committees as well. So you could also, if there was other interest in participating in other ways, not on the board, but somewhere else, we can plug you in that way too. Some jurisdictions just have that one seat on the board and they just don't have any capacity for anything else. Others really do have folks on all the committees.
Well, I want to thank Edward King on behalf of the Board of Trustees for representing us. And I'd love to sign up for the newsletter. If you could give us an easy way to sign up, that'd be great.
We can just take care of it for you.
And I think, and I'll echo the thanks to Ed for representing us. I think one of the challenges is that, of course, since Ed isn't a trustee, he can't speak officially for the town. So if there are decisions to be made, they need to be brought to the board needs to discuss them and then decide. And sometimes the timing, I think, of that can be a challenge. So
The board meets every other month. The next board meeting is this month, so it's October, December, February, and so on. So it's 6 times a year. And in June is the annual retreat, and that's typically a day and a half. And because of our members being dispersed as they are, we've done that in Vail every year. My guess is we'll keep doing it up there. It seems to be pretty central for our members. And Edward was able to come to that. That's where I do that. It's been really great working with him. So we're thrilled to have you have a presence from Lyons.
I'm just trying to remember which commission Ed King serves on.
Sustainable Futures.
Okay, perfect. So we would be able to get reports through that commission and through Trustee Ellison.
yeah, and Ed has been sending, Ed occasionally sends me information about what CC4ca is up to. So if there's interest from the whole board in receiving that information, we can certainly make that happen. Any other questions? I have just a couple, and the first is, how is CC4ca funded?
The majority of our funding is member dues, and that is by design. And so this predates Anita and I. Well, Anita was with the coalition from almost the very beginning in her elected role, but it predates both of us as staff with the coalition. But from the very beginning, the vision was be funded primarily by member dues so that the organization doesn't depend on outside funding. And we've maintained that. But we also, when it makes sense, we go after funding from philanthropic foundations and use that to just add capacity. So the majority is member dues, and that means we don't have to follow any other foundations' priorities or any other funders' priorities. We set our own priorities and do the work on behalf of our members. But where there's good alignment, we go seek out additional funding from typically foundations.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is about the state legislature. So as we all know, ballots dropped today. We should be getting them soon. Everybody vote, everybody listening vote. So if the state legislature should pivot from making addressing the climate crisis a priority, has CC4ca thought about what that might mean for your organization and how we can work with that?
For sure. I'd say 2 main implications for the work we're doing. Certainly, if that happens, it means we're not likely to be moving big bills forward anymore, as long as that's the case. So a lot of our legislative work becomes either defensive, protect the gains that we've made on climate policy, and look for opportunities to, are some issues that do have bipartisan support, so we certainly welcome and work hard and even now find those opportunities, but then certainly in an environment where climate is not a priority for the legislature, then we're really looking even more for those. So that's one. And the other is the governor, assuming the current governor remains the governor after the election, that's still a priority for him and his agencies. And there's a lot of the regulatory work isn't going to change, even if the legislature changes, at least not over the next couple of years. And the programs themselves, the agencies and the programs that the governor and his cabinet operate, those are all immensely consequential to local governments on climate. So there's still, even if that happens, still a ton of proactive move the ball forward work to do on that side. And then on the legislative side, very much protect what we've got and look for opportunities to move the ball forward a little bit when we can.
Great, thank you. And then finally, so if Director Kaplan had questions about municipalities who have adopted the 2021 energy efficiency code, could he reach out to you guys for some assistance?
Yeah, we were going to suggest on our way out, we were going to offer that.
Okay.
It's part of our glad handy.
Nice work. Nice work. Impressive. Trustee Dottie?
Just one last question. I'm very curious. I haven't looked at our draft budget yet, but I'm assuming there's a line item then for our member dues. I'm just curious as to what they would be.
For Lions, it's $1,000 for population size. So it's just based entirely on population. And then we've got a mechanism built in to provide discounts for jurisdictions that, for whatever reason, economic hardship or whatever it might be, or that whatever the number is for their size, if that's problematic, we work with the jurisdiction to work.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really very much appreciate your presentation and coming out to see us in person, and just appreciate all the work.
Neither of us will complain about an opportunity to come up with life. Thank you all.
And if any of you are going to be at the library on Friday, I'm going to be there watching the play to support Friends of the Library.
Oh, yay. Yay, I was supposed to be in that. I had to bow out because of another commitment, unfortunately, but I hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure I will.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
You bet.
Yeah, your jacket, Jim.
No, thank you.
Oh, they're gonna talk to him.
Okay. Okay, so next up is general business, the wildfire mitigation update. Administrator Simonson.
Thank you. There is a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to be sharing, and it will be presented by David Cosgrove, Parks and Rec Coordinator, and Zach Burgess, Code Compliance. And I guess I'd like to have them do that before I make any comments about public.
Terrific. Okay, Director Cosgrove, would you like to go first?
I think Zach actually will start off from code compliance, and I will also be commenting on the slides as well. Zach, are you gonna pull it up?
Yes. Let's see. Hello, Mayor Rogan and trustees. Thanks for having me tonight. Let's see, is this going to work correctly? Desktop one. Oh, sorry, just a quick technical difficulty here.
We haven't had any yet tonight so far, so.
Oh, yeah, all right.
Pressure.
Zach, is it helpful if Victoria shares it? Is it in the, oh, there we go.
Is that working there?
There we
Yes.
go.
Yay.
Excellent. Okay. It's a new computer, so I'm still learning how to do certain things on the phone too. There you go. Can one see that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so here is our quick mitigation update. Oh, that's the wrong button to push for that. Let's see. There we go. I'm not sure if it's best to just read these slides or just summarize from them while you read them, but basically this report is about different preparations we've made for the town for wildfire prevention and to ease the efforts of firefighters in case that there was a wildfire event. These preparations included limb pickup and drop-off events, goat grazing services, mowing and trimming of buyout properties by town maintenance staff. And then also, most importantly, just sort of relationship building between the town of Lyons, Boulder County, Lyons Fire, HOAs, and residents. So it's been a lot of different moving pieces, but hopefully that this presentation will clarify exactly how things have been going along here for us. As we move into the next year, big suggestion is to take the lessons from 2022 and then also look for additional funding so that we can have larger collaborations with Boulder County and Lyons Fire District. I did hear Mr. Browning's comments about the Martin parcel. So I saw the letter that was addressed to the BOT a couple weeks ago from Mr. Browning and former BOT members. My update is that when I first came on board in April of this year, the Martin parcel was brought up in a couple different ways. But in summary, I took that information back to the then Wildland Coordinator, Emily Gubner, to Lyons Fire. And while she acknowledged that there, Martin parcel was there and that it had been addressed before in other reports at the time, she recommended that we look at other areas of town to mitigate more recently than sooner than later. So we talked about Horizon Drive, and we also talked about the area of 4th and Park, the Stacy parcel, as we call it. And Lyons Fire said that basically those are great places to start with our mitigation projects. So the Martin parcel did come up again in a meeting with Chief Zick and Steve Pischke last week. And they're going to re-examine the area, but while we were planning for things after I signed on board, basically the Martin parcel was not considered a high priority at that time. So Lyons Fire did just hire 2 new Wildland Coordinators named Nicole and Rich Palestro. Oddly enough, they were my instructors for the Wildland Firefighting Academy that I attended a couple months ago. And they are not Lyons locals, but they're close enough off of the Valley Road, but just outside of town towards Estes Park. And following our meeting from last week, they said that Nicole and Rich were going to go do another assessment of the Martin parcel to see what the conditions were. But hopefully that clarifies some confusion about how the Martin parcel was being addressed or not. So, going back to earlier this year, we had a tree limb pickup event on the week of May 16th. Bear Forestry provided 3 laborers, 1 chipper, plus trucks and trailers for hauling extracted materials. That event ended up being, I believe, like a 4 or 5 day pickup event, as opposed to the 1 or 2 that was initially proposed. Lyons really turned up for the event. We had a lot of excited residents to contribute. That was also my first sort of like door-to-door campaign of the event, and I had a really big response just from going door to door, plus our information from our website and newsletters and Lyons Happenings page. Primary focus of the event was chipping disposal of all piles of limbs, brush left out by town residents. You can see the coverage there, basically throughout the entire town. Approximately 135 cubic yards of mulch was created over 15 dump loads, equaling 3 loads per day for 5 days. So the dumpster that's near Bone Park and the gardens is considered a 30-yard dumpster. So we filled that 4.5 times, which is pretty significant. We also had a tree limb drop-off event at the utilities building. Approximately 107 households participated in the event with over 160 loads dropped off. 70% of the households were from town of Lyons, and many of them made multiple trips and loads, the highest being 8 loads from several households. We also had participation from Apple Valley neighborhoods, Blue Mountain and Steamboat Mountain, Old South St. Vrain and Lions Park estates, and the Red Gulch Road areas. Again, people cited the e-blast, the utility bill insert next door, our online social media and newspaper as a source of information on the event. I also did some door-to-door knocking for that event as well. You can see our volunteers at event. Big thank you to those that participated. And we had a lot of support for additional events per year. You can see the cost there for $13.40 for 2 invoices. And the total number of yards limbs dropped off and chipped was almost 14 tons, which is very significant as well.
I can handle this one, Zach.
Okay.
We have a current RFQ or request for quote that just went out last week for another project regarding fire mitigation, tree removals, dead wood removals, and it's for all the parcels indicated here in the confluence area, the flood recovery buyout parcels in the confluence area. Staff talked, and several of these parcels were also cited in the original fire task force as being parcels that should be looked at and mitigated. And so we were able to put this together, staff and Tracy Sanders, project manager. And so we put this out. It went out last week. We have a pre-proposal meeting, mandatory pre-proposal meeting this week, tomorrow, or Wednesday rather, excuse me. And Zach, if you can go to the next slide. Here's the project schedule for that. Proposals are due on the 28th of this month, and we'll be bringing a recommendation to the Board of Trustees at their November 7th meeting with a recommendation for a potential approval. Obviously, we won't know what we get back until that date, but we're hoping that we can do some further mitigation on all those buyout parcels before the end of the year, utilizing some of the budget that was set aside for 2022.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So now going to a recap on what I was calling Operation Mighty Goats from last month. So we had 2 different goat operations in town, Firehouse Farms and Goat Mowers LLC. We hired them to address 2 town-owned properties that were susceptible to wildfire activity and invasive weeds. Again, this is one that Lions Fire also supported once I started discussing the GO operations with them. Both services did very well in reducing the potential for high rate of spread during the wildfire event. I will say just that we learned a lot in this entire process of having the goats in town. I think most people enjoyed them, but more importantly, they actually did eat a significant amount of vegetation and weeds that should not be around in town. So while we were researching the goat services, we were advised that the goats do not eat very well in high temperature days or on high temperature days. So after 90 degrees, the goats will slow down and just seek shade because it's too hot for them to be in the sun standing and eating. So unfortunately, while they were here in September, we did have some pretty intense heat waves come through town that did affect their ability to continue eating. So I wouldn't say that we hit 100% of the mark of the land that was set aside in the time of days that we set aside for the goats, but still we learned a lot that would be very useful for a future project. Another thing that was mentioned as sort of an after action report was that even though I provided pictures to both parcels, to both parties of both parcels, still when they arrived and had their goats, they're both surprised to see the type of vegetation and the variety of fuels and the thickness. So I think that means next year it won't be just a online or email type setup. Like will require that the owners also make a visit on their own prior to any kind of proposal to work in town, just to avoid that. And again, going back to time of year, it's a large factor in the taste and tenderness of plants and leaves to the goats. So as the seasons change, the sugar content also changes. And so the vegetation is actually tastier for the goats in spring versus summer and fall. Firehouse Farms provided 11 goats, fencing, and nighttime goat pens. They were originally predicted to eat about an acre a week. They ate less than that. We did have a volunteer named Doug Miller, who was a rock star. I will say he did an amazing job as a volunteer for essentially a month of nighttime goat herding and watering. He definitely affected, sort of in a positive way, the success of the project. But we'll have to see for future parcels if volunteers are going to be enough for more complicated areas that might not be as easy to access, which are more ideal for the goats to work anyways. So by the end of the 28-day contract, the goats ate fire, fuels, and weeds across 3 acres. They ate different kinds of weeds. They didn't eat every kind of weed. Some of it was going to be determined once they showed up and started eating. We were really hopeful and had heard in different sources that, for instance, that the goats were going to eat myrtle spurge. But in this instance, with this group of goats and on this parcel, the myrtle spurge was not a priority for the goats. So they kind of picked at it for, a little bit here and there, but they didn't eat the myrtle spurge like we were hoping. They still ate other fire fuels and other weeds. We ended up spending $2,100 for actual costs, following their predicted cost of $2,500. So I have a couple of pictures here. Firehouse Farm said that the goats ate all the thistles except Scotch thistle. They ate the mullein, but not the milkweed, which is also poisonous to them, or much of the myrtle spurge. They love the locust trees and the broadleaf grasses. What you notice is they thinned most of the area, but did not take anything to the ground. This operation was interesting because the pen was set up for 4 to 6 days at a time. And then we had the volunteer move the goats in and out of a protective sort of shed at night. But the owners of the goats were actually out of town in between days of moving the pen around. So it was an interesting arrangement, but they had a large space to eat over the course of 4 or 5 days. And I think that might have affected how they responded to what was there. But as you can see, they still did a good job. They really liked eating these locust trees, which is an invasive tree. They stripped the bottom of the post and the bottom of the tree here, and it's actually going to die in the wintertime. So this will not be coming back next year. So there were a lot of those in that area on that Stacy parcel, but they did a great job. You can also see they went through this area here, ate all the lower fuels from the ground up to goat height or goat and a half height, I guess, depending if they're on their back legs or not. You can also see here on this picture that the left side of the trail had some mitigation work and the right side did not. So you can kind of see that it's been eaten down, but it's also been trampled down. So it's kind of a deceiving picture because I'm not positive that this area is just eaten as it is. It's probably a combination of dry grasses that were eaten, but also kind of stepped on and pushed over, as opposed to this kind of wild looking area on this side. And just for reference on this picture, one of the areas that we used the goats was basically on this walking path heading east, and then the entire north side of it. So this trail and everything to the left of it was mitigated by goats, including these little patches of trees and larger bushes. And then we had Operation Mighty Goats, or not, sorry, we had goat mowers, which was run by a woman named Kimberly Jones. She brought 36 goats into town. She also provided fencing, day, night, shepherding. The goats ate up to 1 acre per day, and they required 15 gallons of water per day. I think they actually probably drank more because of the heat that was coming through that week. I think it was probably the hottest week of September was when they were here. So originally they were here, they were gonna be scheduled from Tuesday to Friday, September 9th. They ended up requesting a 5th day, which we granted because it was still under our budget. And they were assigned to 4 acres, this lot between Horizon Drive and Steamboat Springs Road. The goats ate fire fuels, vegetation, ladder fuels from various trees. By the end of the 5-day agreement, they had successfully mitigated for fire fuels and weeds across 3 acres of the 4-acre lot. Our predicted cost was $6,500 and our actual cost was $7,500. So from this view here, this is Horizon Drive up here, and the goat mowers told us that the goats ate native grass, cheatgrass, ragweed, dead undergrowth of yucca plants, elm tree leaves, Rocky Mountain sumac, staghorn sumac, and mountain mahogany. The goats also ate some rabbit brush. So we have, you can see this little area here was not touched by goats, but everything else that you can see from this viewpoint was mitigated by the goats. They eventually worked, there's a drainage ditch over here on the right side. They worked down this drainage ditch and then up the hill. And we tried to get as close as we could to these homes up here up top. But they did a great job too. Another example, you can see the left side of the tree has been mitigated, the right side is not. You can kind of see it sort of here. So this part of the drainage ditch comes through and they stuck to the left side of this picture. So a little bit thicker in here on this hillside, they worked this down pretty well. These goats for goat mowers were significantly larger than the other goat company. I think they had just a much older herd of goats in a larger pack, and they also did a great job because they move the pen throughout the day. So it's not just a pen set up and then sit by. It's Kim Jones and her husband Carl moving the pen every couple of hours, so the goats kept on the move and always found fresh fuels to eat. And they did a great job. You can also see up here, going up to Horizon Drive, before this entire section was overgrown and the goats ate it down almost to the ground. You can see it stripped down the lower portions of these trees here too, for the better. And yeah, I don't know if anyone here recognizes this spot, but this used to be knee-high weeds and grasses. Suggestions for future goat mowing proposals. I proposed it as a thought of how many days can we have the goats in an area. I am suggesting for next time we go by overall parcel size, independent of number of days. And that way we just can commit whoever is doing the goat mowing that they're there until the project is complete. And that way we don't have the 3 out of 5 acres mitigated within 5 days. I'm also going to require active daily management from the goat owners instead of relying on the volunteers. So Doug Miller again did a fantastic job and was a huge supporter and a great volunteer for us. But I just noticed that from the other goat herd group that having that active daily management is really pretty key going forward. Like I just said before, we had larger goats on the second group, and going back to that note about scheduling for April for better efficiency and just better tasting food for the goats to eat. And then the last point here for future proposals is to confirm with town staff to help with providing water and emptying trash cans. Town staff and the maintenance crew and Dave's guys all came through like pros to support the goat operations. They're great in making sure that Kimberly and Carl had everything they needed for it. It was just more of a note for me to make sure that next time I provide the right communications to confirm that they're around and they can provide assistance with that.
Another, thank you for that, Zach. Another mechanical operation we perform is the actual mowing, and a good distinction here and follow up to make after Zach's report on the goat operations is that the mowing is oftentimes oftentimes performed in areas where we couldn't, or the goats rather are placed in areas where we couldn't mow. And so having them available and utilizing them on terrain and in areas where we couldn't get mowers is something new to us, but I think showed that we can have successes for fire mitigation in those areas. So I think it was a great first run with that, and showed that it worked not only for reducing those fuels, those fire fuels, but also helping with weed mitigation. So it was a good learning experience, but we also do perform mowing on several of the buyout parcels at least twice a year, depending on weather, once in the spring and once in the fall. And we've just completed that on several of the buyout parcels in and around the confluence. And so we just wanted to show you that we try to do that, and particularly after last season, where we had some scary times with fires starting up in grassland areas. You can go to the next, please. And so we did want to give you a recap of the 2022 money that was budgeted, and the expectation for 2023, at least at this point. So there was $125,000 budgeted in 2022 for overall fire mitigation efforts. Year to date, we have anticipated that it is around $10,000 that has been spent, primarily on the goat grazing efforts. There are other line items in the budget that were utilized for other efforts related to fire mitigation. $9,500 was in the general fund for limb pickup events or chipping events. $7,500 was utilized for the 5-day curbside pickup event that took place in May. So there's an additional $2,000 available, and there is another event that is being scheduled for November 14th, a curbside event. We're assuming that those costs will be similar, and so there will be an additional $5,500 plus or minus that will be needed if we are approved to move forward for that event, and we would request that would come from the fire mitigation funding. We also are trying to put together another limb drop-off event, which is currently being scheduled for the weekend of the 5th or 6th, and we're leaning towards the 6th right now. And Boulder County, who had helped us previously with the chipping on that event, is not available. So we would need to hire an outside service to help with the chipping of anything that's dropped off at that event. So we're assuming there will be additional costs associated with that as well. Along with that, we have the request for quote for the Confluence buyout property tree trimming and fire mitigation, which we expect back, and we'll bring to you a recommendation on the 7th. And at that time, we'll see what those costs are, and we would ask that those come from the fire mitigation funds as well. Any remaining funds we would roll over into 2023 budget. And really right now, I think our project manager and staff are looking for ways that we can leverage those funds into larger efforts. There are a lot of fire mitigation funds out there right now, and I think we would look to utilize those funds and work with the fire department on getting a true assessment done for the remaining parcels in town and find a way to really tackle some of those larger efforts.
Sure. So going back to other fire mitigation projects. So would like to bring the goats back in April of next year. We are looking at a couple different areas in town right now, up by Longs Peak and Longs Peak Drive and near the cemetery. Potentially collaboration with HOA up there. I always talked about curbside limb pickups in May and October. Again, limb drop-off events. electric underground mitigation study, which I know Aaron can speak about later if he wants. We also have a townwide wildfire assessment in the works. When I met with Lions Fire last week, they're in a time of finding new people to hire to be part of Lions Fire. So they just hired, like I said earlier, Nick, Nicole, and Rich Palestro. They're also looking to hire 2 more evaluators and employees that could potentially do what Evelyn Gubner was doing while she was working at Lions Fire, to do parcel assessments and to also work with the town. So their priorities going forward is they are again building up their department, but also looking to do more with public education campaigns and messaging. And another one of the priorities moving forward is just to continue working on preparedness and evacuation planning. This note about Boulder County Fire Mitigation Partnership opportunities, education, and mitigation efforts ties in with the Boulder County Noxious Weed collaboration. So I know that some of the weed plans and events from Boulder County have been, I know that with the Hall Ranch involvement in recent weeks with Boulder County, I know that there's been a lot of questions about how Lions and Boulder County should be communicating or working together. So I've been spending some good time trying to develop those relationships and partnerships with different people in the county to look ahead for next year to see how we can help each other. Firm believer that we should have a working relationship with them to make sure we understand what they're doing and what our plans are and where they can be larger collaborations. Other projects, Town of Lions mitigation efforts on public lands, i.e. the buyout parcel mowing, which we just talked about, and tree removals. And then again, the HOA partnerships throughout town. Dave, anything you want to add on any of those? You're good. Going back to Lions Fire priorities. So they hired their 2 consultants. They're going to be hiring the 2 consultants. Again, they want to work on the evacuation plans and collaborations with Town of Lions. They're also currently working on an MOU with Left Hand, I believe, to start up a mitigation crew that might be able to be more involved with Lions as well next year. I know that some talk has also come up about the WUI code, but this is just a quick note that last I talked to them, we are standing by for state level action on the WUI code, but they're going to suggest the adoption of the 2021 IFC. So I know we can still add amendments to that as it comes up, but that's just a quick note on where the WUI code stands. And again, going back to townwide educational preparedness campaigns, how to prepare, how to evacuate, what to bring, etc. Possible funding, partnerships, and grants. So Tracy Sanders, project managers, she's been working on a couple different grants for us, and also looking for funding opportunities related to mitigation and education. One of the ones she's working on right now is a grant for a consultant to complete a wildfire assessment for the town that could assist in preventing a wildfire. I think it's important to note that we have Lions Fire Protection District, but their district is much larger than the town. So this could be a good way for us to pinpoint even further with what could be done here in town. And then there's the Wildfire Partners Partnership, which is available to assist in assessments and private landowners with matching cost mitigation. So I think right now, as it stands, they offer up to $2 grand in matching funds to assist with private property mitigation, up to 50% of the project cost. So I have been pushing that information a lot to property owners here in town. Some ask for more, and some tell me that they don't need to get assistance to help mitigate the property, which is fine too. I would say that a lot of my work in the last couple of months has been trying to educate property owners on mitigation issues that could arise with dead trees on the property, or overgrowth, or lack of just property care. So that is all we have for this slide, and that's what we have for now.
Great, Zach and Dave, thank you so much. I've just a couple of questions, but I wonder if Administrator Simonson would like to add anything.
I have just a couple comments in regard to, we were very appreciative of the previous board financing more funding than ever toward wildfire mitigation. Unfortunately, I don't think the timing was quite right for the fire department, to have the people in place to help us with that. And they did explain to us that they have much less concern about in the Lyons town limits than they do the area around us, since we have so much of our property irrigated and the availability of hydrants, so they're going to really be focusing the majority of their time on that WUI, the wildland urban interface, and then want us to work on doing these mitigation efforts in town. So unfortunately, it sounds like, the original assessment that was done on the Martin parcel sounded like it was a different result than the groups that have gone up since then. And so we certainly have not taken that off our radar at all, but waiting for now these new, we've worked with 3 different sets of people doing assessments there. So if the board chooses to roll over the remaining funds, we will follow whatever they give us as direction. But unfortunately, we have not been able to get a clear set of, this needs to be mitigated on this property and this doesn't. They have not provided that. So that's why we're looking at some of this outside, maybe some neutral folks coming in too to do an assessment to see what they think. But this board has identified what you want as your wildfire priorities, and those are listed in that pyramid sheet. So we will be following through with those items. And interestingly, the wildfire mitigation money is just now coming down. We've just been notified, and we are at the table and we're collaborating with Boulder County and our other partners, and we probably will be able to leverage much more now that we'll be part of that collaborative. As you could see, some of the different items that Zach identified that we can help with matching, even maybe for private property. So although unfortunately we may not have expended these funds in the way the previous board had hoped, I think we still made some real progress on creatively on areas that are very, very difficult to maintain and cut grass on property. So questions from the board on our efforts, or what you'd like to, I will probably discuss this at our retreat on Saturday, but other questions for Jack, Dave, or myself?
Yeah, I have a few questions here. So I'm just trying to understand, and I know you were on the previous board, so maybe you can fill us in. I only have Mark Browning's perspective for now. So what I'm hearing is $125,000 was budgeted. Only 10% of that has been spent. It sounds like one of the priorities for that money budgeted was the Martin parcel. So this is all true. You're nodding your head like you were there. You remember I wasn't there. So, and Dave, I'm not sure. I know you haven't gotten the bid back yet for those buyout properties. Do you have any idea how much that might come out to, like ballpark idea?
I don't. I would hate to venture a guess. I know the number of trees roughly that were marked on those parcels, and we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40. Well, I would just hate to guess because it could be all over the map. But if you were going to put me on the spot, I would say it's going to be somewhere around $35,000 to $45,000.
And we'll know by our next BOT, like the November 7th meeting. So I'm just
So
curious.
there's much more than 10% that will be spent.
Right, so that's why I'm trying to evaluate my.
The year doesn't end in
Right,
July. We
right,
still
right.
have October,
Right.
November, December.
So this will be taken care of before the end of this
I
year.
would guess that we'll spend closer to 50 to 60% of that by
Okay,
year.
okay. So potentially 75,000 could roll over to next year.
Potentially.
Okay.
If we don't use it.
Okay. And I have another question about why, because the Martin parcel keeps coming up. And I've walked the Martin parcel myself. I don't know if anybody else has. There's a lot of dead wood around there. It does seem like a fire hazard to me, but I'm not an expert. And I'm just wondering, why wasn't the Martin parcel included in this bio tree removal and fire mitigation service request? Because there are several parcels there, and I was wondering if that was an option or not. Yeah.
Well, I can add a few comments. I think that there are several aspects to it. There are several things occurring. One is there's still an access from the west side, and I'm sure several people will have opinions on this, but I think to do a true fire mitigation on the Martin parcel, there needs to be a true assessment done, because there are several different ways to mitigate a property. The Martin parcel is a heavily wooded property that needs to probably be professionally assessed to better understand what type of mitigation it is we're going to be doing on that property. It is going to be a massive effort depending on the type of mitigation that is done, and there will need to be access. It's almost a 9-acre parcel. And depending on how we mitigate it, you will need access from both the east and west sides. We have been working with Boulder County to better understand our right-of-way and access off of the west side of the parcel onto County Road 69. So that we can properly mitigate it. The other is that the Ecology Board has made it quite clear, and some citizens during audience business during Board of Trustees meetings, that they would like to retain the natural the natural characteristics of the property. So just how much are we going to mitigate the property, and how would we like to retain those natural characteristics? And so I think, from that standpoint, staff would like to better understand, what it is we're going to do when we go in there and quote unquote mitigate it.
Right. And it sounds to me like the more people you'll ask, the more opinions you'll have. I mean, everybody's gonna have a different opinion about this. I'm just wondering if there's some way of finding a compromise or consensus, or maybe at least the dead wood on the ground is picked up or taken care of. Maybe you don't have to talk. Maybe there are phases to this. Maybe the first phase is to remove all dead wood on the ground.
Well, we've had 3 different groups assess it with different responses.
Right.
I think from the fire department's initial standpoint, they're looking at it and saying, look, the Martin parcel has a heavily wooded area privately owned on its southern border. It is bordered on its eastern side by a park, which is irrigated. And then on its western and northern sides, it's bordered by a river. And so to us, it is not probably the highest priority as far as fire mitigation is concerned when you consider all of the other interior town properties that consist of, a lot of heavy grass, undergrowth, and other heavy fuels that are near homes or border homes that could be addressed initially as far as fire mitigation. And I think and Zach, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's what we're hearing.
So when you compare the Martin parcel to these bio properties, for you, these bio properties are more of a fire hazard?
Not to us.
They are just properties that were identified in the initial fire report. And again, without better understanding all of the aspects of the Martin parcel, which is a much bigger undertaking due to the amount of wood that's on it, we thought this was one that we could get done with a reasonable amount of budget and get taken care of, because they were also identified in that report.
So it sounds like these bio properties will be taken care of by the end of this year, and then the Martin parcel could be revisited next year. I just don't see it on.
That is correct. When we have a further, a further assessment and possibly be able to leverage further funding and better understand how it is we're going to mitigate it fully.
Okay, got it. Thanks. I have one final question about the mulch. just curious as to where can locals use the mulch that's been created from the chipping, or is there mulch available somewhere? Is this parks mulch?
No, it is available. I've had people contact me and they've come and gotten truckloads.
Okay,
Cool. How do we do that?
They've contacted the front desk. They've contacted me directly. We've utilized quite a bit of it. The Botanic Garden also has a pile down there that they get directly from Boulder County. It's a little bit different. But the mulch that we bring from the curbside pickups, we have dumped down there and we make it available.
We could put it out in the blast.
Yeah, we should do that because I know people love mulch and it's not
Sounds like
cheap.
there's gonna be a lot more.
Yeah, it sure does. Okay, I know trustee Adding, you can wait.
So it seems to me that the biggest problem here is getting the right information and the right assessments of what to do. You said you had 3 different people make assessments and there's still some unclarity. What's the game plan for getting the authority here on what we really should do?
Well, right now it's having the newly appointed team by the Lions Fire Department to come out and walk the site with Dave and Zach and start identifying,
Well, I don't mean the Martin
not
parcel
Martin.
specifically, I mean holistically.
Holistically, I think all of those things on that last slide and in your pyramid, we hope to accomplish in between now and the end of beginning of 2024.
Okay, I guess what I'm.
Education.
Yeah, education,
evaluation
what's the expert opinion who's the key expert opinion here
plan.
on what to do?
I think we're using a combination of Lions Fire Protection District because they represent our area. We're paying taxes to them to do this work. And then now this new Boulder County Collaborative that was just formed in the last 2 months, month and a half maybe. They think they have resources to bring to the table as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna add, we did also apply for specifically for wildfire mitigation grants to find someone to come and assess the town.
holistically.
Yeah.
Okay, and my point is, it's just budgeting money and spending it doesn't solve the problem. You've got to make sure you spend it correctly.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're going to talk to 20 different people and get 20 different opinions. And so I think the key thing is to get the right authority with the right knowledge in here, so that we can do it holistically, because everybody here, no one's an expert. No one's an expert on this. Okay, that's my point.
Anybody else?
So I don't think that, I just think that this presentation was fantastic. and I think you guys are doing a great job. So
Thank you,
that's all.
Trustee. Trustee.
Thank you.
So I know I haven't done a professional assessment, but I was a wildland firefighter. To me, the Martin parcel would take a lower priority, having such a large irrigated area to the east, which is the most probable direction of a fire to be moving. So that's just my opinion rather than professional assessment. And the other thing, I know you were looking at bringing the goats in April. And I don't know, because cheatgrass would be one of the larger things for the fire to spread. And would that be bringing them in too early so that the cheatgrass would still be able to grow back and seed and cure in June? Would it be better to bring the goats in a little bit later, maybe?
Go ahead.
Yes, my understanding is that the cheatgrass will still be there. It survives through the winter time. So if the snow is melted, it's available to the goats. We're not using them to just eat cheatgrass, but there's other things as well. But from all sources I talked to about an appropriate time to bring them back for mitigation, they all said that April would have been a really good time to start the process. It's also important to note that they don't eat 100% of everything year to year, but the idea would be to potentially bring them back for similar areas in future years. And the way that the process works for when they digest the seeds is that the seeds are no longer viable to plant. So they have found in different projects between both companies that year to year there's a pretty significant reduction in in the weeds and other things coming back to the top level of the soil. So I was told that April is the ideal time, but if there are other resources out there that can provide a better suggestion, I'm all for it.
Do we have a time frame for when these professionals are going to be hired, appointed, and actually get about the task of
That would
prioritizing?
be Zach. He's been liaison with the fire.
Sure. So the new Wildland Coordinators just got hired, I think in the last week or two. They're actively looking for 2 people to replace Emily Gubner's position as that assessor type role for Lions Fire. I don't know what else she did for Lions Fire, so I'm sure her job was beyond just assessing town sites. I'm sure it was involved with other mitigation works around their entire district. I don't have a time frame for you, but I just know that it's a priority for them going forward, is to build up this wildfire crew that can do more locally and elsewhere as well. So that's why they want to hire 2 more, and then also establish that MOU with Left Hand for more hands essentially to do mitigation work.
Well, thank you so much for this report. I think this has been enormously useful, and I think it would be beneficial to get a report on this maybe every other month to kind of know where we are in the process, particularly with the new hires, fire department. So I want to make a couple comments about the goats. I get the feeling that some folks think that the goats are just sort of a cute thing and, and nice for everybody, but the goats actually can mitigate in areas that a weed whacker can't get. So for example, on Horizon Drive, there's a rock retaining wall in the ditch, and there's no way that a weed whacker could get in there without completely breaking, but the goats were able to eat the weeds. And so it's, it's fun, we all love seeing the goats, but it's also highly effective. And I've heard from a number of other mayors, including the mayor of Longmont, that they're now going to hire goats.
We heard that FEMA is making it an eligible cost for reimbursement under federal funding now to not be using the chemicals and for disaster mitigation.
So that's great news. And also, I know that one of the neighbors up on Horizon Drive who was initially skeptical wound up hiring the goats for their property when they were done with our property. So now, one thing I want to bring up 2 more things. One is a town-owned wood chipper. So the town owned a wood chipper that was destroyed in the flood. I know the previous board, we discussed whether it would make sense for the town to actually purchase a wood chipper. I think one of the concerns, if I remember correctly, was that we would need qualified people to operate the wood chipper. However, there were people operating it previously, and I'm wondering if any of the grant monies that we're talking about, because we would use the wood chipper for fire mitigation, I wonder if it would be an eligible expense or if it's something we want to consider.
I don't know if it'd be an eligible expense, that we can certainly ask the people we have grants applications in for. You could use your fire mitigation money to buy one if you wanted to. The bigger issue is what you heard today, is that to do the curbside limb pickup and then mulching, that didn't even include mulching, took about 4.5, almost 5 days. And it takes 2 to 3 people all day to do that. And so for us, it was really more of a capacity issue, as well as training. Of course, it's a huge liability for a community to offer that, because you can't really use your seasonal workers who are teenagers to do that type of work. So it's taking our 3 main people a week, and nothing else will get accomplished when we're doing that. So it's a capacity issue, unless we could still buy one and hire maybe someone. But then it comes just to maintenance and storage and other things. But Dave, do you want anything to add there that you've researched over the last few years?
I have. This has been a question that's come up since the flood. We spent an inordinate amount of resources running it. It was something pre-flood that the town offered monthly to citizens, and the amount of resources that we put towards that, I had that drawn up at one point when it was being done at that time, but it's really just right now, we're not fully staffed, have not been fully staffed for upwards of 2 years. And it does take, I think Zach had the numbers up there. They had the last 2 crews when we've done the curbside, it had taken them at least 5 days to get through the town, 3 crew members, and we have 5 full-time guys. So, you know, when you're looking at May, that's getting into our busiest time of year. Not that it can't be done. It really is just a capacity. And when you look at the costs of doing that event, paying our staff to do it as opposed to just contracting it out, it's really apples to apples. It's you know, it's just as cheap for us just to rent it out when you start looking at having to maintain what is really a $85,000 piece of equipment to purchase and own.
Thank you. We could do 10 years of higher.
So just to clarify, we're outsourcing to a local forestry company currently, right?
The past 2 times we have done it, it has been with Bayer Forestry. That is correct.
And I feel like a lot of locals use that company as well. I just wanted to say thank you for planning a second curb pickup and drop off, because I know that there were lots left over in the streets, and I saw that as a fire hazard myself, just seeing limbs lying around the streets. So I'm really thankful. I don't know if everybody got theirs to their drop off or if they're still laying out there on the street, but I'm really thankful that we're going to have a second chance at this. Thank you.
And so the final thing I want to talk about is the annexation of the Martin parcel. And so my understanding, and Attorney Dittman, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it can be annexed by resolution. Is that correct?
What was the question? Sorry, about what was ordinance or resolution?
Can the Martin parcel be annexed by resolution?
I don't believe so. I mean, typically annexations have to be via ordinance, but I'm not prepared to say definitively, but I believe all annexation must be by ordinance.
Okay. And
I think the difference is it doesn't need to go to a vote. That's the major.
Okay. So is there anything preventing us from completing the Martin parcel annexation?
Well,
I
first
mean,
of all,
going through the process, I think. Victoria, go ahead.
yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't connect the Martin parcel annexation with wildfire, so I'm sorry we didn't have that prepared. But the Planning Commission is aware that this was a priority to get the Martin parcel annexed, you know, from the previous board as well. And it is on their priority list along with many, many other projects. However, with the comp plan and reviewing development applications as they came in, this just has not surfaced. We do want the Planning Commission to review it and make a recommendation on what it should be zoned, even though that looks very obvious to some people, it is not obvious to others. And usually when you're going to annex a parcel, you want your Planning Commission to take a look at the zoning. So they simply have just been consumed with the comp plan and applications that they've come in this past, 6 months.
Yeah.
They have full intent to get to it, but there's really having it not annexed isn't creating any issues that we're aware of. So it just hasn't percolated to the top, but it is certainly not forgotten. But I would think you would want some public process on that.
And so the Martin parcel is how many acres?
Almost 10, it's 9,
Almost 10.
something.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't any parcel over 5 acres to be annexed, doesn't that need to go to a vote?
Depends on its location in the eastern corridor or not. And Trying to remember how the current code is.
If it's the municipal.
If it's the municipal government, it does not have to.
If it's surrounded by town-owned land, if it's an enclave, which I think it is am I correct on that? Yeah, it was the.
Well, it's only surrounded on one side by town owned.
But it's town-owned property now. so
Is
town-owned
it town-owned property
will
within the
require
land, within the town boundaries of the town, though?
It's currently owned by the town, but it's located in the county adjacent to the town.
I think that's the reason, because it's owned by the town, it doesn't have to go to the vote. That was
Correct.
my
Oh, it doesn't need to go to a vote.
Right, okay.
But I
Yeah.
think with the ordinance as well.
Attorney Gittman?
Yeah, if you look at section 15.1.330, it talks about the process for, and there's exceptions if it's an enclave, essentially from going through all the various, even if it gets just doesn't require a vote, there's still a pretty extensive process you have to go through. And so there's an exception if it's an enclave. And so I think the distinction here is that it doesn't need to go to a vote because it is town owned. However, it doesn't qualify for the super expedited process, if you will. It still have to go through all the process which require a PCDC recommendation and an ordinance. As I thought, all annexations do require an ordinance, but this one needs to go through several notices as it means a PCDC recommendation. It needs a decision by the BOT on the ordinance itself, including 2 readings and a public hearing. So there's quite a bit of process involved, even if it doesn't require a vote.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. I think that's going to clarify a lot for a lot of people. And then finally, does the board tonight need to give a nod to moving money from the wildfire mitigation fund to help pay for the tree limb pickup and drop off?
I think you just, a basic nod saying, do you feel like that's an eligible expense under what was intended for the wildfire mitigation?
Do we?
Yeah. All of the things listed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, great. Thank you again, Zach and Dave. Really appreciate all of your work and all the work putting this report together. Super helpful. And so I think it is 10:09. We have a couple of meaty items coming up. So I think let's take a 5-minute break. That's okay with everybody? So the next item on our agenda, so the undergrounding resolution has been moved to the 7th.
It is the
Yes.
7th, even though it says before.
Fourth, that's the 7th, yeah.
Okay, all right. So the next item then is the youth mental health update.
Thank you. So at your last meeting, the trustees requested that staff gather some information about current issues, data, statistics, and resources offered around youth mental health in our community. So I reached out to numerous different groups over the last couple of weeks. Boulder County Public Health, St. Green Valley School District, Lions Emergency Assistance Fund, the Sheriff's Office and Co-Responder, and Out Boulder. Unfortunately, there are no, so far anyway, that no one has produced Lion specific data for me. But I did attach a link about some of the reports and fact sheets that a group called a Boulder County Youth Alliance offers. So I did provide that link. At first, I was a little disheartened. I wasn't getting a big response from folks. But then toward the middle of last week, I was able to connect with several different groups and found out that there is actually quite a bit out there for youth mental health issues, ranging, of course, from everything from, depression to substance use to LGBTQ plus to non-smoking programs, teen pregnancy. There's a lot out there. I think one of the issues for us, and I included quite a few comments by Cherie Moreau, which is the program director for LEAF and does the mental wellness section, of gaps that she sees locally. So I consider her kind of one of our main resources here. The school district is very limited, of course, in discussing numbers of students, but actually have several programs as well. And so they walked me through their website and they admitted these are kind of buried deep, the resource pages. So I tried to also attach some of those. But really it seems like the two main sources of just overall resources for teen mental health or youth mental health is Mental Health Partners out of Boulder and 211 Colorado. And those are lists of resources that are available. What I did like is that several other groups are offering things such as free bus passes to kids to get to programs in Boulder, since we don't have anything locally really. And support groups and all sorts of opportunities to get involved. The other thing I think that kind of it was good to hear it is that every school within the St. Green Valley School District has at least one counselor and interventionist, and middle schools and high schools have at least two, and that those folks are not there to do therapy, but to give resources to parents and students who are needing them. So, but you have to get the student to go to those folks. The school district also told me, it's kind of interesting the way they said it. They said the first line of education and intervention should be the parents, if at all possible, of course, because there's a lot of minors involved here. But that, of course, all students are welcome to access the interventionist or the counselor. So I kind of gave you a little overview of things I found out. And then I know that you had talked just very briefly about, did we want to consider putting together a task force? And I think that is a good opportunity, but I think it's a good option. Sorry, it's been a long day. For the board to consider, but I don't think it's to necessarily form all sorts of groups or commissions. I think there's a lot out there. I really think based on previous experience when we were doing this with seniors, we went through this with seniors in town once before, that they didn't have access to resources and programs. So we brought together the right people and we put together a resource guidebook. And that might not be the right forum for youth. Maybe we need to do something more in the electronic mode or something. But I think the resources are there. It's a matter of finding them out, getting them in one place, and somehow getting those distributed to the kids. But as I talked about, we don't have anyone on staff that's qualified to be intervening on specific situations. But we've been saying they would like to take a more active role in that, but they need some more resources too.
So if I can speak from my experience with LEAF, when I was chair of the LEAF board, we actually decided on developing this mental wellness program back in 2018, and we hired Sheree Worrell. And the reason we did this was because a lot of the clients, their long-term clients at LEAF, have mental health issues, and we're finding it very frustrating to work with mental health partners. So mental health partners actually have a very long waiting list, and you were only allocated a certain number of appointments with mental health partners. It's very, I would say, crisis oriented and very difficult to get in. There's like a 2 or 3 month waiting list, and very difficult for people from Lyons to get to Boulder, where mental health partners is located. So this is kind of the reasoning behind starting the mental wellness program here in Lyons. I really appreciate all of Sheree's feedback here. She has a lot of really good questions.
Yeah.
I think these questions need to be explored more. I do think that she needs more resources. I do think that having LEAF next door to a bigger building with a dedicated space to mental wellness might be able to patch well or partner well with the behavioral fund in memory of Zoe Chase that the Chase and Brett family would like to start. I haven't heard a lot of specifics around this fund, but I know that there has been some conversation, some discussion around what that fund could finance. Could it fund a dedicated space in the LEAF building, for example, where teens feel comfortable to come in and chat with Sheree, who has like drop-in office hours. So I feel like this is something that needs to stay on our radar. And it isn't something that our teams, especially if they're not driving, can access easily by going to Boulder, whether it's mental health partners or the out. So again, this is why LEAF has very specific programs here in Lyons to meet.
It did say they had a 24/7 walk-in crisis center and a 24/7 crisis line.
Right.
But then to get the follow-up service takes a long time.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, looking through all of this, the Healthy Youth Alliance I think, does provide really excellent services. Out Boulder, of course, does, when it comes to LGBTQ plus assistance in the area. There's really nobody in the state that does as well as they do. When the day is done, the area that is not being addressed is exactly what St. Green Valley School District is acknowledging, which is that their 100 plus LCSWs do not do therapy. And it is in fact, I believe, individual therapy and group therapy that is missing, not from the crisis intervention perspective. It's certainly there. It is not there in the entire middle segment of the population that just can't go out and pay a therapist $125 an hour for therapy. And so to me, what you're saying, if there is a way through LEAF or through a memorial fund or anything else that we were able to contract with therapists who would be able to take a lower than normal fee specifically to provide ongoing therapy for children who are not in crisis. Because that's actually where the most good is done, is before they get there. And I just had a client today who's dropping out because he can't afford to pay me any longer and recognizes his son who is in the system here needs weekly therapy. And so I don't know, given I looked through all of this stuff, the only problem I had was 211. It would never load.
Oh.
I tried to get it to load on several different, it wouldn't load on, on my search engines. But looking at all the other stuff, that to me is the area where my biggest concern is. I don't know how much a town government can do about that when the day is done. So I'm not sure that a task force as such is, that might be a little bit of overkill, given the level of services that I think we have existing in the county, which most of that I knew about, not all of it. But it's still not going to address this particular area, and I'm wondering if government can address this particular area or not. So I guess the question I have, thank you for doing excellent work on that and giving us a lot of stuff to go through. That was very, very helpful to me. But do we in fact need a group on that, or do we just need to keep our eyes open to possibilities that may exist to provide supplemental care for therapy for art that are specifically town related?
So I've met with the student advisory committee twice. They both had 2 sessions on this, and they echoed exactly what you said. The biggest issue they started with is there's just too many barriers to get formal help. And a lot of times they just want to talk to somebody. And they started talking about, can just somebody be at the library after school, and then you're just walking home, and I just stop off and talk to somebody. Very, very simple stuff. I did ask them a lot about, I tried to really get them to hone in on, what is it about Lions? Why are we having so many problems in Lions? Because if you look at that student advisory committee, there's 6 kids on it. 5 of them do not go to high school here. They all left for mental health reasons, to some degree. They're saying Lions has this one thing where we have one elementary school, 1 middle school, and 1 high school. And the kids just go straight up. And they said, you are who you are, where you were, what you were in kindergarten. There's no changing. There's no inflow of kids. There's no changing your identity at all. You're stuck. And they talked a lot about different high school, different kids that just could not fit into this high school. They just could not take it. What became really clear to me is that's okay. If you need to go to a different high school, you need to go to a different high school. What we need to do is make sure that we have transportation opportunities to New Vista and Boulder, to Skyline, to Longmont, so that they have an opportunity to basically rebuild themselves. So that was a very big thing to them, is how can we get to other high schools if this high school is not right for us?
That's an issue I know for neighbors trying to get to New Vista.
Exactly. And so I take the bus in, and there's 3 girls going to New Vista, and I can tell by looking at them, they're not going to fit into this high school here. And I think there's been some families in major crisis here because they couldn't get their kid to another high school. I mean, it's seriously, and then we also know people have sold their houses and literally moved out of town because their kid just could not fit into the high school here. But the first thing, so that was a big thing to me, is we need to work on transportation out of town. That was a really big thing, is keep as much of the bus system going so they can do other things. But they echoed all they wanted, which is to maybe walk to the police department, walk to the library, walk to some space, that there wasn't an enormous barrier to having to make a phone call or pay $120, or they just wanted something where they could just stop in and talk. And, if they only show up once, show up twice, that's fine. But you're exactly right. I think it's doing something before they're in crisis is the most important thing. So those are the 2 major things I learned from them, is opportunities in education and an informal, mild crisis.
I'd like to respond to Trustee Williams and then to Trustee Edding. So First, I want to say, I think the municipal government can do something when it comes to supporting organizations like LEAF and providing facilities or creating opportunities instead of in a permanent facility. I think that also commissions like the Housing and Human Services Commission can also help when looking at providing essential services and working with co-responders, for example, to talk about this kind of option, like, is she available at the substation after school? Would she be willing to open her door and I'm talking about in the interim, right? Like, I think long-term it would be ideal to have should be at the new LEAF facility who has some hours after school. So already we're getting some good information. Secondly, I know some families who are in crisis right now, who have kids at the middle school, and they're not feeling supported, they're not feeling heard, they're not feeling seen, and I don't know what else we can do to support them, except for maybe meet with the superintendent and talk about that transition from the elementary school, who does see them and does support them, and does recognize their pronouns, etc. And then all of a sudden dropping off a cliff when I get to the middle school, it's like, whoa, nobody understands who I am. What happened? They just went like not even a mile across town, and it's like their whole world has changed. And so how do we create some kind of consistency or some kind of pathway between the elementary school, which is so open and supportive, to the middle high school, where all of a sudden they feel like they need to leave, or kids who go from loving school to hating school. That, as a former educator, that really that tugs at my heart, and I think there's some work there that we can do as a community to kind of help that pathway just be more. This is a small town. We have one elementary school, one middle school / high school, and it'd be great if the kids could continue. Because if not, I see a huge exodus. I do. I see it happening. I've been part of those carpools, whether it's to Niwot or Altona or wherever it is. Those carpools are out there, and my kids and other kids just don't feel like they're a part of the culture here. They don't feel like they can be a part of it. They don't feel like they're seen or accepted. I mean, it's not easy when you're with the same group of kids from preschool and you're not allowed to change. You kind of have to fit that.
They really honed in on that.
Yeah, I believe it. I've heard that.
That was a big issue. But there's other small towns in Colorado.
Mhm.
I mean, that might be unique to the Front Range that were this linear system up. But like, what are they doing in Kremlin? What are they doing in all these other towns that have one elementary, one junior high, one high school? You are who you are from day one, and you're not allowed to change.
So it's a national problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if towns our size deal with that, town I grew up in eastern Kentucky, that's exactly the story.
So I think, first of all, I'm really glad that you asked the student advisory committee what they wanted, because that was my question, is what do they want? What do they need? When it comes to transportation, can they not use the Z-Trip vouchers? Is that a possibility?
They can use.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they know all of that.
If they know about, that's that resource again, what's
Yeah.
out there that they can look at on their own,
Mhm.
and figure out what might work for them.
So, so in talking to the president of the board about Boulder County, they were telling me that one of the things that's been most effective for youth in that organization is, they have that beautiful new building, and they have an entire basement that's dedicated to youth, and it's a drop-in center. And so people can go there and just chill out and get what they need and be who they are and relax and interact. And so I wonder if, I'm not sure that a full task force is necessary at this point. I think I agree with you that that might be overkill. But I wonder if it would make sense for staff to work with LEAF to determine what we can do in terms of where is there a dedicated place that kids could go, whether it's the library or LEAF or wherever. Where can kids just go drop in after school 5 days a week? And then moving forward, how can we help work with the school district to create a better environment, and that may not even be possible, I don't know. But I am having coffee with Dr. Hazak this week, so I will talk to him about it. So I'm also curious about, there's also a youth group at the library, and I made a note of it. It's the Library Teen Advisory Group. And so I wonder if it would make sense to reach out to the library and see if there's a space that they can dedicate. And also see what the teens in that group see as priorities in terms of mental health. But I think I agree that at this point, I think it's, more staff working with leave staff and library staff and kind of moving this forward and winding up with hopefully some sort of compendium of resources that we can get to the kids. Does that make sense to everybody?
Strong agreement. Simply having a drop-in is like 80% of what the student advisory committee was asking for.
So maybe reach out to Cherie and see if that's something that she and Leaf could help facilitate, having a 5-day-a-week drop-in, even if it's just for a couple hours a day. The library or
That room with the fireplace at the back of the library, that's a very cozy room that can be reserved and it's pretty private.
or Cherie's office. I don't know when
Cherie's
she
office.
schedules clients.
She has an office on the parsonage of the
Yep.
the white church there, the Methodist church.
So maybe that's the way to move forward, I think.
I'm happy to reach out to both Cherie and I think also Lynette Anderson, who's starting this co-responder program. Right now she's kind of as a response. So if she has some time to do something proactive with Cherie, that'd be great. Also, I think from a funding perspective, I would like to reach out to Boulder County.
Yeah.
I think they have a responsibility under their public health to assist us with some of these things. And I'd like to also see what resources are out there that we might be able to tap into.
Okay, that's great. That's good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so next on the agenda is discussion direction regarding whether the PCDC should explore the potential for increasing density in Old Town Lyons.
This is actually an item the mayor requested we put on the agenda to see if there's an interest. As I said earlier tonight, I know they have a full plate until we get through this comp plan. But this is one of the areas I think they're hearing in the comp plan is something we need to address. And that is the need, currently we have several neighborhoods that have single family residences with ADUs or multi-families living on one property and not being registered as ADUs because they don't meet the code. And would there be an interest as a group to ask the planning commission to kind of identify segments of the community that might be appropriate to overall rezone? So we're not having all these spot zones coming in, because we're finding every week more and more people that have 1 or 2 ADUs on their property, but they don't want to come forward and be registered because we don't allow that. So what we're looking at is it appears most of the HOAs don't allow it. So it really does come down to what in the comp plan they're calling central core town. To take a look if there's an appropriate delineation of segments of, blocks that could be rezoned from R1 to either R2 or R3 to both meet our needs for housing, help those residents become to change them from being non-conforming to allowed uses. And also then provide hopefully opportunities for some more affordable, smaller living units. And I think this will come out of your comp plan at the end of it as well, but I think the mayor wanted just to know if the board has an interest in that as well. Or do you want to, or do we want to wait till this process ends and tackle it another way?
And thank you for that. That's accurate. And I feel like we should not, my feeling is that we shouldn't wait for the comp plan to be adopted to start discussing this. I think we know that there are several multifamily units for sale in town right now. And I think starting the process now would help preserve affordability and help not displace folks. So totally open to other opinions, obviously. But I think what we're looking for is an answer to the question is, do we want to ask the PCDC to explore this?
So, hey, David. Unmute yourself. Chair Hamrick. So I've got a long history on the PCDC. I don't know exactly what we accomplished, but this is one of the few things that we did accomplish was the ADUs. And everything I learned about it was what we had to do is separate ADUs from what are traditionally called duplexes. And there's got to be a barrier between them, because if you just effectively said, okay, these ADUs, we're just going to make them unregulated enough that they're effectively a duplex, then we should do exactly what Town Administrator Simon's saying. We should just rezone everything R2. So we decided at the time we did not want to rezone everything R2, that we wanted to keep it single family. And so we wanted to have ADUs with enough delineation between that and duplex. And there's a few things you can do, like ADUs have to have the entrance facing in the back. A duplex can have both the entrances facing on the street. Those are some of the things that separate them. Other towns did other things to separate them, like they didn't allow ADUs to have mailing addresses. They didn't allow ADUs to have separate utilities. There was all kinds of different things. We just picked and chose some of them. But the biggest barrier to entry, and the problem is going to R2 doesn't solve this, is if you do a internal ADU, one that's actually in the house, that means it's got a separate kitchen, which means you have to have a firewall that separates it from the rest of the unit. So detached ADUs are actually much easier to build. Internal ADUs are almost impossible in Old Town Lyons because you have to go through and build firewalls. And the cost is just way beyond. And even if we did move to R2, it wouldn't change the building code. Duplexes still have to have firewalls. At least that was my understanding at the time. David, you might know more about it, might have discussed it. So I think we still have a major barrier.
Well, and I think this question isn't only about ADUs, right? It's philosophically, do we want the PCDC to explore increased density in the core neighborhoods of Lyons? So for example, do we want a single family lot? Can we see a triplex being built there? You know what I mean?
That's right. We did have to have a total tear down until we rebuild.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes, we would. So I think the question is there interest from this board in having the PCDC explore increased density in the core neighborhoods of Lyons?
And so I think ultimately is, do you want to rezone R2? Because that would be the cleanest way to do it. Do you want to basically take big sections of town and rezone it R2? I think you will get a lot of pushback because we did want to do the ADUs.
Do we want the PCDC to explore doing that?
Sure.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Anything to preserve affordable housing, if that's the way to go.
Yes, so it does bring up for me, do we have building code issues in 2021 that we don't have in 2018 related to ADUs? Just it's a question. But yes, I think we should have them do.
Yeah, I'm okay with this one.
Okay, so then Chair Hamrick, if you're still awake, maybe if you have a scotch in your hand, I don't know. Okay, so the direction then is to have the PCDC explore increasing density. And the next question is also related to the PCDC. Would you like me to take this one? Okay. So Mayor Pro Tem Farrell actually brought this forward. And it's something that I worked on when I first joined the PCDC. Do you remember? Yeah, it comes around every few years. We almost got the downtown design guidelines done, and then I think it got pulled at the last minute for funding reasons. So there's been a lot of work done on it. But the thought was, do we need to update design guidelines around town to encourage the development that we want? Because the development will happen when the development happens by right anyway. And do we want to make sure that it reflects the character of the town of Lyons? Is the way I look at it. And so updating the design guidelines, you know, we talk about design guidelines for downtown, for the commercial downtown district, for the eastern corridor, for the commercial district in general. And I think what I would hope for from PCDC is advice on which areas of town should get design guidelines and how that updating should go. And then, you know, we can, there's been a lot of work done already. In fact, I think it's probably almost ready to go. So that's the issue. Trustee Dati?
Yes, I would highly encourage, looking at design guidelines. I had an encounter last week where I was approached by somebody who has a property adjacent to here to talk about some rock that had been put down on the public way, the safe roads to school. And then next thing you know, I'm in here asking, is this consistent? Is this part of our guidelines? Has there been an error, etc.? And if there had just been some really clear guidelines, design guidelines, I could have just said, well, we have some design guidelines and these match the design guidelines. It would have made things so much easier for the person who is coming to a trustee to complain about what had been put on their property. And for me as, you know, trustee being able to say, well, we actually have some design guidelines and we're just following these guidelines that have been proposed by PCDC, adopted by the DOT. Don't you think that would have made things a little bit easier the other day? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You're not the only one.
I saw a very good example. I saw a very concrete example of where these guidelines would have been so helpful to have.
Trustee Delman? Do we want to direct the PCDC
Oh,
to
yes.
investigate design guidelines?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would very much like, having a big history in this, to direct the PCDC to look at guidelines. But if we do, you know, we have to seriously consider them. And I know the previous board wanted nothing to do with it. That was across the board, no. So I think all of us would also have to, but I do think we need to talk to our commissions, because there are some commissions out there that were very much against it.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Nope, I'm agreeing.
All right, so Chair Hamrick. All right, so that's unanimous. That's great. Okay, so we'll start with trustee reports. I think we're starting with trustee Delman this time.
So for the PRC, at their meeting, the main thing they were trying to figure out, upcoming priorities. And one of the things I thought was interesting was a loop trail that is hoped for in the future around the whole town, north loop and south part of the loop. So that's actually all I have for that. And then I do have a question. Has the town decided on an endorsement or not of the tax for the emergency services?
We did as a board agree to endorse that. No.
If the fire department did. That
Which
was
they
the
did.
They did?
Yeah.
I never heard.
Oh, yeah,
They did?
that's what Chief said told me.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thanks for asking.
Mhm.
That's everything.
Any questions for trustee Delman? You're off the hook.
Okay. Trustee Dottie.
So the EBC will be meeting this Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. I will be out of state, but I will possibly attend virtually. There are a couple of spreadsheets, since I knew I was going to be out of state. They actually wanted me to report as a liaison on the progress, basically reporting on the progress of our BOT goals and also in relation to the comp plan. So we have two really great spreadsheets. I'm not sure who made these into these really beautiful documents. This is not what it looked like when I started, but thank you to whoever worked on these. I don't know if it's you or Paul Dreyer, but this is really cool because it's basically taken all of our goals that we had set for the EBC and prioritized them and actually said how much EBC is involved and basically saying whether the work has been completed or if it's in progress and also its status. So everything's broken up into a spreadsheet. This is something that we can kind of revisit every month. So if anybody else wants to take that model back to their commission,
That's what we are doing
that's what you're doing.
overall with all that pyramid,
Oh,
so that you
fantastic.
all are using the same form.
Great, great.
So-
So everybody will have this.
You just, yeah,
Great.
you guys are just
And the other spreadsheet here has to do with the comp plan goals. So it's just kind of comparing the comp plan and how it pertains to the EBC. So these are things that were requested and that we're working on. And so either I will present that or I will share that with the chair and he'll present that to the committee. The Housing and Human Services Commission did not meet this past Monday, or I guess last Monday, because of the draft plan, the draft comp plan, the workshops that were scheduled at the same time. So that meeting has been rescheduled for next Monday, October 24th. And then the, I don't know if you want me to report also on the Chamber of Commerce or not.
Did you meet with them after we met with them?
So there was a social at A-Lodge, but their next meeting is this Thursday at 5:30. I don't think I'm able to attend since I'll be out of state, but if you'd like to attend. So maybe I'll attend virtually. I'll see their meetings are kind of last, like I just found out today, this Thursday.
Okay.
But it seemed like they had a good partnership with Leaf, where they were asking everybody who showed up to bring 2 canned goods to donate.
Great. Okay. Any questions for Trustee Dottie? Trustee Eddie?
Okay, so the Student Advisory Committee, I think we covered all that. I don't have anything to add that we haven't covered. We meet again next week. They took this week off. It was that 4-day weekend, so they meet Sunday. The UEB, they have very long, very detailed meetings. I did share with them the pyramid of the Board of Trustees priorities. They had a lot of questions on it. I think they overall thought it was helpful, but they saw a lot of inconsistencies in it, some things that needed to be cleaned up, explained to them as a first draft. So let's just deal with it. But they would like to see that cleaned up, and they would like to see at least some aspect of priorities, not necessarily of all the tactics, but of all the major ones that we had. You know, we had trails as one, we had something whatnot, we had Eastern corridors, one major strategy. They were wondering which ones of these was the highest priority. They did add some stuff to infrastructure, like we did have like some rate studies, like a water rate study. They wanted also an electric rate study as well. For some reason, Chairman Kirk can tell you more about that. They talked a lot about the solar farm and the battery storage status. Aaron's not here. He knows a lot more details. Quite frankly, I get lost because it's a very, very detailed board. They would like to be involved a little bit on the water share stuff. So if we have a workshop or if we come to any conclusion on what we want to do, they would like to be.
Can we invite them to the water workshop?
At least in one of them. And then they do know that there has been executive sessions on the sewer treatment plant. Whenever they can be told, they would like to figure out what's going on. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Any questions for Trustee Getting? We'll make sure to invite them to the next water workshop, and whoever can come is welcome to come. Also, the workshops are recorded, so you might let them know. Yeah. You're up.
All right, so the EAB hasn't met since we met last, as no update there. The SFC, we met last week. There was discussion about, Edward Keene's gonna reach out, well, he's in contact with the student advisory board. For them to be an advisor, which is, was planning on going to the meeting Sunday, but didn't happen to the next one.
Yeah, it's gonna be this
Coming Sunday, no, it's fine, just to try and work on that coordination. And with them just being an advisor, not being a member of the SFC. They discussed, they both, the Lions Thrive. They were concerned there wasn't much climate change in there, and they reached out to the consultants, but didn't feel like they got much feedback, so they sent the info to Jocelyn. So that's, what else? We discussed about the new building codes. There were a lot of discussion about that, possibly going to us, informing us to that we're going to go to 2021. There was a question, so they feel like they're having trouble with the sunshine laws, with sending emails, so they were curious, and if it's possible, if there's a way they can coordinate things through like Teams or Google Drive, if there's a way.
Attorney Dittman.
And so what exactly is their issue? They say they're having a problem coordinating thing. I mean, they're just trying to find meeting times or.
No, it's not so. And so essentially it's replying all the emails, trying to coordinate things for. So if there's another way, instead of using reply to all, if you use a team so they can update a file. Or Google
So, I mean,
Drive.
if you do like a Teams meeting, that's a meeting as well. And the open meetings law is pretty clear that any way you convene, 3 or more public officials, that's a meeting. And so if you want to find like a meeting times, a way to do it is to say, as we do on this board, that we, suggest a time instead of reply to the clerk, you should reply to their staff liaison. I mean, you could potentially do a doodle poll so long as you're not allowed to do any sort of substantive discussion as part of that doodle poll. But you can't do, work, collaboration that isn't publicly noticed and publicly open if it involves 3 or more, pretty bluntly.
That's the hard part. So trying to coordinate what they want to discuss at the meetings. It's so
It's up to the chair.
Yep. So I said I would ask if there was other options. I didn't think that there were. So that's okay.
And when is the SFC going to meet again?
We met last Thursday, so we're meeting again next month.
Okay.
So
So did you have an opportunity to discuss with those boards combining?
we did discuss with both, not in favor of it. And actually, after to be honest, wasn't sure exactly what both groups were involved in, and looking at the two, they seem to be kind of separate. So where the EAB focuses more on trees and weeds and that type of things, and the SFC's focuses more on like climate change, the building codes, things to that nature. So we can still discuss it, but it does seem, at least from what I've seen, what they're working on is completely different. Doesn't mean it doesn't make sense to combine them. But in the current state, both groups would like to stay separate.
Any other questions for Trustee Wilson? No? Thank you. Trustee Williams.
So the historic preservation committee met for the first time in several months. October 12. And I think we can assume they'll be meeting regularly because the new chair is Sarah Loring. With Brianna as vice chair, there's been one application submitted to join, somebody with a PhD in history. Looking for one additional application. They said somebody had applied, but
She was appointed.
okay, so that's been done already.
Oh, yeah.
But since then, okay. And then looking for one more person with a historical, archaeological, or architect background. We talked about becoming certified through the Certifying Your Local Government Programs. CLG program would make grants available, take in state tax credits for people doing work on certified houses.
We are a CLG.
I don't, apparently they don't know that. And then also the town designation process application is edited and completed. The HPC will designate the depot as its first use of the new application process. That's it.
That's
Did you say they did appoint a vice chair?
Yeah, Brianna.
So we are a CLG. We passed a historic preservation ordinance and became a CLG in 2020.
We can certainly pull all that up, but I know Brianna was involved.
Brianna was involved and Yanni led the charge. for that.
Let's
So
get you some more
Yeah,
information.
that was discussed in the first half hour and they actually were not working for the town's email list on that. So there were 3 of us that didn't come on until 5:30 and they had actually started at 5. So I
Okay.
don't know what happened.
Okay, okay. We can start coordinating with Sarah.
that's great. Any questions for trustee Williams? I'm glad that commission's getting going. That's great. Okay, so the town hall art opening mural dedication library trifecta event was a gigantic success. It was super fun. It was well attended. Trustee Dati was there. And so it was really nice to have a crowd of people who were just happy. Great. The LEHC met and most of the discussion was around the coordinating that event. Will be attending this CML conference on Thursday and Friday this week. It is a conference directed at mayors and includes a lot of sessions that look really interesting. So I am going to try my best to make it back for the bridge opening, but I don't know that I will be able to make it, but I'll do my best. And then finally, I found out today from a resident that 224 Seward, affectionately known as the Chicken Coops, and Mobile Home Park is going to be listed for sale on October 18th. And that is concerning for a number of reasons. One of which is that property is zoned single family. I think it's 3 separate lots. And so the existing use is non-conforming. The residents are extremely concerned that they're going to be displaced. And so I reached out to Commissioner Lochiming to talk about whether Boulder County wants to get involved and perhaps purchase it and perhaps make it permanently affordable housing. I'm not sure what other options we can and should explore with that, but I do feel the need to help make sure that those folks aren't displaced. I think the reason it's going up for sale, according to the residents, is that there have been a lot of repair costs associated with it lately. Last night, there was a violent incident that scared a lot of folks. And so, you know, they're thinking that the owners of that property, which is an LLC. So I tried to look it up on the assessor website. It's an LLC, so we don't know who owns it, but the owners might just at this point be throwing up their hands. So just to put that on everybody's radar as we think about potentially upzoning the core areas of town. I don't know that we have any areas of town right now that are zoned for mobile home.
Not as mobile home.
Right.
We
So-
have several that are R2 and a few that are R3. But,
But we do have a mobile home zoning.
yeah, we don't have zoned mobile home.
Yeah, but that is a possibility. So I just wanted to bring that up.
I definitely like the idea of reaching out to the county, Boulder. It would be great that if Boulder County could do some affordable housing there as a formal project. I think that is definitely the best thing to do. I do remember in the past, the Boulder County Housing Authority talking about they didn't want to get into mobile homes. And so
But
that
now
was
there's no
not,
funding.
But now there's new ARPA funding and they do.
they do.
They
Okay.
They want to help
They're
mobile
open
homes.
to it.
Can you remind us how many families live there?
There are,
16.
I think, I'd have to look at my notes, but I think there are 16. I think there are 7 mobile homes, but I think there are more than 7, actually. I mean, I walk by there every day and it seems like there's more. Seems
There
like
may
they-
be more than the 4 units, 3 or 4 units in there.
Yeah, I think there's 6 chicken coop units.
They're literally chicken.
They used to be chicken coops.
Yeah.
That work is very big.
Yeah.
And what about the idea that you had before about residents becoming owners and creating like a?
So that's another possibility that the county can help with in terms of process and funding is, and this has happened, I think it was a mobile home park in Boulder where the residents actually purchased the park. So the difference is the residents in that part owned their mobile homes. These folks rent, so I'm not
There's
sure.
only one in that part that owns their mobile home.
There's
All
only
the rest
one.
are rentals.
So, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. So, so my goal is to get somebody out there who knows a lot more than I do to talk to the residents and see what the options are.
So is the commissioner, reaching out to the housing authority of Boulder County in that case?
I haven't heard back from her yet, but I
Just
expect,
haven't.
I expect to.
So we don't need to reach out to the housing.
No. No, yeah.
Staff.
Could it even be sold as non-conforming the way it is? It's not.
As long as it doesn't change use, it stays. But if someone removes a unit, it can't be replaced.
Yeah, you couldn't put new mobile homes on it. Yeah.
Not the
Not
way
unless
it's
it got
zoned.
rezoned.
Yeah.
And what kind of turnover, how long does it take to rezone any property? What's the process of that?
90 days probably.
90 days, if you want to rezone that?
There were 2 public hearings.
Yeah,
I mean,
and then, so, yeah, so I think, I would like staff to look at options.
It has sold several times over the last 13 years, probably
Really?
3 or 4 times.
The last time it sold was in 2016 for almost $1 million.
That's it?
Mhm.
1 million in 2016. You haven't seen it listed anywhere.
It'll be listed on Wednesday.
Okay.
And the reason I know is because the property management company sent a text to every resident. And this resident shared the text with me, so it's not a secret.
Do we know of any local investors who might be interested in? Sure. Any local investors we could reach out to?
Yes. I just found out about this tonight, so.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to take it.
And I just found out about it at 4 o'clock this
Right.
afternoon.
I'm just,
So-
yeah, I was trying to think. Who can we reach out to give them a heads up about this project?
And so that concludes my report.
Thank you. Can I add one piece to my report? Just one question I see on the agenda here for Wednesday. I just need to know how, if this is a question. I see one of the agenda items is the lodging tax ballot question. And the question here is, should the EDC have an official stance and does the EDC support it? And so I don't know how that works because I feel like the DOT has already said that we support this.
We have not,
Have
said
we
that
not
we
said that
support it. We have put it on the ballot.
So by putting it on the ballot, does it mean that we endorse it?
No, it does not.
Means we want the
We're just
public
asking
to.
the question.
Where we want the public to.
Do we want to know what the EDC thinks? Are we going to have an opinion?
The Board of Trustees, I don't think will have an opinion. It's a general election.
Okay.
So there's a pro-con statement that went out.
Yeah, Brandon?
Didn't.
Yeah, there's also limitations on the extent to which we can advocate for ballot measures that we put forth. I mean, we're basically limited to doing a resolution and a factual pro-con statement, and that's it. Under the Fair Campaign Practices Act. So you have to be pretty careful about to the extent to which something is endorsed. I mean, the board can certainly, they could, pass their own, statement saying that we support this. But they can't really do anything more than that. They can't go out and campaign for it as a board. They can't, certainly spend any town funds for or against it. We are this more or less limited to those 2 things I mentioned, a resolution and a pro-con statement.
So the commission in itself can have this discussion and decide whether they support it.
They could, but they can't go out campaigning on it, right? They can't go post it to social media. They can't, go to door as a commission. Now, the individuals in their private capacity as a private citizen can certainly do that, but they cannot and say, the EDC supports this and go door to door on that.
Okay, great. That's great feedback. And that way, I don't have to say anything.
So I mean, I don't know what their expectation is and what they want to do, but there's pretty limited, and that's all under state law. The idea is that public money shouldn't be spent to support things that we want to send to the voters.
So So I think, yeah, they can have their discussion, but they can't they can't state a position as a commission.
As a commission.
Right.
Okay.
But I could report back to you next month whether they support it or not. If that's the discussion. Do you want to know? Do you want me to report back? Am I supposed to? I mean, they're obviously having this discussion on Wednesday.
We should have had it sooner, because we had a pro-con statement they could have. put
Yeah.
in. But certainly we can.
I mean, I'd be curious.
Okay, okay,
Sure.
okay.
All right, administrators report.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this quick. Some of you may not know that the Dr. Scholl Foundation had contributed $25,000 to Lions last year. They like projects about beautification, landscaping, walkability. And so last year they gave us $25,000 and they wanted that to go toward the landscaping at Second Avenue. You can picture on the south side of the bridge and in the Black Bear Hole area. They did notify us that they would like to donate $50,000 toward the Fourth Avenue Ped Bridge project to do the landscaping and beautification between the Ped Bridge and Home Park.
That's excellent.
So we had applied for more and hoping to use it in your walkability goals, but this is what they wanted. So if you guys are good with that, I'd like to accept that.
Yes.
Okay, there were some questions about the football stadium district refund. And in my report, it noted that the town of Lyons refund for that project is $16,047. And it is earmarked that it is to be used for youth activities.
Can it be used for your mental health?
I think they want it to be because it is a football district. I can find out, but if not, I think they wanted it to be kind of sports oriented for getting kids moving. But let me find out. And then what I need from you is direction on if the board wants to decide how to use that during budgeting, or would you like the PRC to bring you some ideas if it is about recreation?
Well, I think if it has to be about recreation, then
Send it.
yeah, let's have
PRC,
the
Okay.
PRC, but.
And if it could be mental health, you would like to, okay?
This was Mile High.
Yeah.
We're in that.
Yeah, we're in that district.
I was having a chat with some of the other mayors, and I think Longmont got something like 170.
Oh, no, I think it was more like 4.
The other municipalities got much more money than we did.
But nonetheless, that's a little funding that is extra for us this year. And then, of course, we want to let, I had put in my report about the Lions Community Foundation grants. And at the time I wrote my report, I didn't know that they had awarded more after that, or we hadn't gotten the notices yet. So the Lions Community Foundation has awarded the town several projects for funding in 22-23. They want to continue, of course, the Sandstone Summer Concert Series. We know that's very popular and a lot of the community participates. The Winter Wonderland Concert Series has been held in Laverne Johnson the last couple of years. $3,000 toward the Parade of Lights. $1,100 toward Lions Senior programs. $5,500 to Arts and Humanities Commission. And $1,500 toward the creative outlets is the painting of the electric boxes. And $4,000 toward Hearts of Lions. That's our public art program, outdoor public art. For a total of $17,262 toward town sponsored events. And that represents 35% of the grants, that funding that they awarded for next year.
Wow.
So they're huge partners and helpful to us, making sure all these great community things can happen in our town. And that there will be a reception Friday, November 11th. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and a couple staff have been invited to. And then I don't think, the only thing I want to mention is couple items coming up on your agenda, or your schedules. This Friday, it was moved from Tuesday, Friday, October 21st is the grand opening of the 4th Avenue Ped Bridge. It is going to be a happy event. We're hoping lots of students will ride their bikes over it after school. So 2:30, a few words will be spoken on the south side of the river, and then hopefully the kids will arrive around 2:15. Short, sweet, and local. Oh, and following that, Boulder County Sheriff's Office is doing an open house. So while people are in the neighborhood. Saturday is our budget retreat. Here in this room, 9 to 3, and we will feed you lunch. And there'll be a virtual option. We will make a virtual option. And then, of course, next Saturday, the 29th, is the spectacular at the elementary school, followed by the parade at 6. Oh, I did include Cassie included her financial report. It's a little different format this time, only because she's been so busy trying to get the budget balance to present to you. But we do want to let you know that the sales tax for the month collected in August, received in October, continues to be up about what it has been all summer, 7.38%. And so that is about almost $80,000 more than we budgeted this year for sales tax receipts. And of that, we stayed very consistent with the month of July. 62% is from local sales and 38% from non-local sales. It's a trend we see specifically in the summer months, of course, with more visitors and weddings. And then she did include the roll up for each of the different departments. No red flags here for us. Some of them might be running in the red year to date, but that's only because of, again, timing on payments and other things. And she had no significant concerns for this month. Project updates from Tracy Sanders. I think the US Broadway project was accepted at 90% designed by CDOT. So now we take that across the line to 100%. And we'll be going out to bid for that project in November. And construction over the winter and spring with the goal to be done by Memorial Day. And so we should start seeing some activity going on there over these next 2 months. We did meet with Boulder County on site regarding the St. Vrain Trail extension. They did not give the impression they have any additional funding to put toward that project right now. So we will continue to work on that one. And then the solar farm, we did receive 3 eligible bids for the solar farm project. And the subcommittee that was selected is reviewing those and interviewing the parties. So hopefully we will be bringing something to you on that at our next meeting. Summit, curb and gutters in process. Some of the foundations are poured and we're getting ready to start paving the roads. So, and then of course, also in the admin report was the library's annual report. They have a requirement to submit that to you every year. They are more than happy to come and present it in person if you want, but they wanted to just start with this. So if you have any questions or you want them to come, just let me know and we'll schedule that for November 7th.
Questions for administrators?
We have a Lura meeting this Thursday.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, as of right now, we do. We are waiting to hear. We have not received the presentation materials yet, and I gave them until tomorrow at 3 or 4.
Okay.
And
Right.
so I will let you know by tomorrow at
Not coordinated. Okay, and then the budget workshop is this Saturday at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock,
Sure.
and it's here.
And likely we won't be sitting on the dais.
No, you'll be down here.
Okay, perfect.
And
So
you'll get your notebooks. Trustee Dati just got hers early because she's leaving for Florida on the hard copy.
Will it be recorded?
We sure can.
Or I don't-
Normally, we don't
Okay.
because it's a workshop, but I mean, it's not hard to do so if we're gonna have a virtual option. Might be hard, well, no, we can make that.
I have a question about the financials. So the general fund expenditures compared to budget were over in a couple of areas, and I'm just curious about why. And those areas were office operations, general insurance, and municipal code codification.
Okay.
And is that, maybe that's normal, but I'm just curious about why.
Muni code, when we did codify, it was well over, I think, 16 or 17 ordinances. So it turned into a huge project. We were trying to do it annually. When Aaron thinks that, if we get it done quarterly, it's going to be easier. It's not going to be any cheaper. That's just the way it's going. What was the other grant fund? Office operations?
Office operations and general insurance.
I know for Sursa Insurance, when we were going through and doing the renewal, I went ahead and did across the board. We were going with an average of 6 to 8%, just because lumber, everything has gone up exponentially. When I did submit all the paperwork for the renewal, Sursa contacted me and they said, thank you, because if you hadn't done it, we were going to do it for you. So everything has just gone up. Office operations, I'm not sure what the line item is. I'm trying to think.
Why don't we, we'll look
I
at
can
the details.
look into that one for you.
Yeah, I just am thinking in terms of budgeting for next
Oh,
year.
yeah.
And that's just, it across the board. Everywhere I turn, it's $10,000 for everyone.
Well, for
I know,
example,
it's
tell
much
them,
more
the election questions we put on the ballot, we budgeted
We normally budget 5,000 to 6,000,
to
just
be
in
part of the
case.
ballot.
With the 2 questions that we submitted, Boulder County, they've come up with, now you have to have one available in Spanish. They have these new requirements. I got the estimated cost back and it was over $9,000. I was shocked. Netherlands,
Two ballot questions.
2 ballot questions are gonna
$9,000
cost us over
to be-
$9,000. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's
So in the future, we may, if we just have 1 question or 2, I hate to do this to Dolores, but she's certified to do so. We may want to just hold the local election and get back
It was-
in that.
I was
That would be much cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, it's cheaper, but then you have the scrutiny that people have of elections and
Yeah.
have to find election judges and.
Oh, and on that
so-
note, I'm sorry to interrupt, but on Friday, Boulder County was here. They were getting the camera primed, because ballots were going out, cleaning out the ballot box. They did, mention that they're going to have the voters servicing poll center at the library, I believe, the last 2 or 3 days of the election. So if because people always come here, I need to vote, I need a ballot, we're not running the election. So they will have a place set up in the library where I lost my ballot, I need another one, they'll have someone there who can reissue them one. So that's a first for Lions, so
That's great. Let's publicize that as much as we
get
can.
our money's worth, yeah.
Yeah, let's get the money's worth out of that ballot.
In fact, I want to reserve the community room on November 7th, that Monday, and it's been reserved the entire week.
Yeah.
So the entire second week of November, the 7th through the 11th has been reserved.
That's great. That's great news. And, I'll say that I did the tour of, Boulder County voting facilities and
It's
ballot
something,
counting
isn't it?
facilities. It
Yeah.
really is. And I highly recommend if there's a public tour to take it. It's really fascinating and impressive.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the report and the answers. And Attorney Jetman, is there a legal update? Did we reach a settlement?
Unfortunately, I wish I could tell you we have, but there has not been a settlement reached. There's still a lot of discovery work ongoing right now. And so you're going to probably see the next meeting, some bills start coming in for that, unfortunately. But I'll be the first to tell you if the settlement's been reached, I promise you. Hopefully that will come. I did have one other kind of more general update I want to give you. And it's not something we need to take action on immediately, but something I want to keep on your radars because it could be a big issue for next year. And that is a law that was passed last year. It's called HB 211110. And what this law does, at a very high level is extends more or less kind of ADA protections and accessibility requirements to local governments on their web technology. There's already kind of an argument that it already existed, but this explicitly under state law extended web accessibility requirements to web-based content. And part of that statute, what it did was it deferred to the Office of Information Technology at the state level to develop kind of rules about how to do this. And those rules dropped this summer. And unfortunately, based on what we've received back from CML, who helped, kind of work on those, is that the requirements are pretty extensive and without any exceptions, really. There's no kind of reasonability, affordability kind of exceptions for these issues, at least currently. And so for one very kind of onerous example that will be required starting on July 1st, 2024, is that this Zoom meeting will have to be closed captioned, which is not necessarily easy thing to do, or a cheap thing to do.
It's different for YouTube and Zoom.
Okay.
It's not, yeah, and according to the DOJ, at least, that the automated captioning services are not sufficient. And so, I mean, my recommendation when we've got an issue in the past is that at least start with the automated captioning, but if push comes to shove in a DOJ lawsuit, you may be forced to live caption. So that's just one example of the issues created by this legislation. Another one that has caused a lot of consternation among the city attorneys group at the municipal league is, documents we have stored online, such as PDFs, would all have to be converted into a format which is both searchable and, or text can be enlarged. And this, from my understanding, is extremely costly, expensive, difficult, in some cases impossible. And so those are some of the types of issues that we're working through. And it's not me personally, it's more CML. And so I just want to kind of, CML is working on this very hard, along with, the County Association and the Special Government Association, with OIT, the Office of Information Technology, to try to kind of create some reasonability in some of these requirements. Because, kind of funnily, there's exceptions for the state agencies, but not for local governments. And so we're, otherwise it's going to be a very costly, potentially burdensome endeavor. And I think we would all like to, provide as much accessibility as possible. But in some cases, as I mentioned on those PDFs, it just may not be possible, which means that documents will have to get taken down or, destroyed earlier than they would otherwise be. And so I just wanted to, kind of put this seed in your mind. This may be a big issue next year if changes can't be made, as well to, consider how we're going to apply with this rule starting in July of 2024. And so it's one kind of thing I just want to, because it is a pretty hot topic right now at CML. And so I just want to kind of let you know that's going on is a big deal.
Well, appreciate that heads up there. That sounds like quite a tangle. Any questions? Especially, yeah. Any questions for Attorney Devon? No. Everybody go get some kind of new IT certification, start some companies, because there's going to be a lot of money to be made.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the, and it, unfortunately, there's, it doesn't just apply to outward facing technology, is also inward facing technology. And so things like, I've heard things like certain police software and stuff like that, like, the companies say, we won't provide you the service, so we're required to make it accessible. And so there's going to be all sorts of kind of issues like that going forward. Unfortunately, this isn't changed.
Talk about unintended consequences. All right. Well, thank you very much for that. Okay, let me get a summary of action items.
Absolutely. Okay, I got, get feedback from the communities regarding any challenges they faced adopting the 2021 International Building Codes. Ordinance 1133 was moved to a date certain of November 7th. You'd like to see an e-blast go out on mulch availability for residents. You'd like a wildfire mitigation update every other month. We're going to reappropriate and reallocate funds for the wildfire mitigation tasks that were presented tonight. Staff to work with LEAF and the co-responder on drop-in times for youth, resources available to youth, and electronic form and search for a dedicated space. Contact Boulder County to seek assistance for youth mental health programs. The PCDC is to explore increasing density in Old Town and the core neighborhoods. PCDC is to look at establishing and adopting design guidelines. Invite the UEB to the water share workshop. Staff is to accept the $50,000 Dr. Scholl's grant for landscaping and seek Parks and Rec Commission recommendations on how to spend the football district funding.
Couple of just,
Alrighty, what do you have?
no, just a little more detail on some of those. A school transportation options will be on our list as well. Boulder County Resources Library Teen Advisory Group, we have a dedicated space. And then working on a resource guide of some sort. I have SFC and climate action strategies into the comp plan, but I think that's really that's why they have those focus groups is to get, yeah. But I can certainly put a bug in their ear to get that done. Give some training or background on the CLG status to the HPC. 224 Seward, did you have that on your list? Is there, just following up with Boulder County and other private providers? Advertised library as a voting location.
I'm sorry, and I thought you had already reached out to Boulder County on 224 Seward.
I reached out to Marta.
Okay, so we need to do more.
Just
Okay.
Yeah.
That has a big history, the big file.
Yeah. Brandon, did you have anything else?
I didn't have anything additional on my end.
Okay, great. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So, second.
Okay. So, discussion,
Passes unanimous.
right? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for taking us through all that. Well, thank you for your time and attention and work. I mean, that was a lot.